In the beginning, before regions had names, and before trainers walked the earth, there existed only the void and the one who would shape everything from nothing. Arceus emerged from an egg in emptiness, and with its 1,000 arms, it began to craft the foundations of reality itself. Time, space, and antimatter were given form through three sacred guardians. But the story whispered in ancient texts suggests there may have been a fourth, and its absence echoes through the generations like a wound that never fully healed. Before you drift off, maybe tap subscribe for more gentle videos, and let me know where you're listening from tonight as we explore together what may have been lost when the world was still being written into existence by forces beyond mortal understanding. The creation trio stands as testament to Arceus's earliest work. Dialga commands time itself, its steel body a monument to permanence and the solid structures that anchor moments in sequence. Palkia governs space, its watery essence flowing through dimensions, shaping the liquid boundaries between here and there. Giratina dwells in antimatter, a ghostly presence haunting the reverse world, embodying the gaseous state that exists between being and unbeing. Together they form a trinity that seems complete until you examine the pattern more closely, until you notice what should be there but isn't. The secondary typings of these three legendary Pokémon tell a story about the states of matter. Steel represents solids, rigid and unchanging, anchoring Dialga to the physical permanence of crystallized time. Water embodies liquids, flowing and adaptive, giving Palkia the flexibility to bend space around itself and through itself. Ghost captures gases, ethereal and intangible, allowing Giratina to phase between dimensions as antimatter exists in the spaces where matter cannot. But there is a fourth state of matter that has no representative among these guardians, a fundamental form of existence that remains unclaimed by any member of the creation dragons. Plasma exists as the fourth state of matter, a realm of pure energy where electrons break free from atomic bonds and matter itself becomes luminous with raw power. It is the state of lightning and stars, of fire pushed beyond mere combustion into something transcendent. In our universe, plasma is perhaps the most common state of all, filling the vast spaces between worlds. Yet among Arceus's first creations, no guardian was assigned to watch over this domain. The absence is conspicuous, deliberate, and when you begin to look for traces of what might have filled that role, a shape begins to emerge from the mists of ancient history. Before we drift any further, maybe tap subscribe for more calming videos, and tell me where you're watching from tonight. The evidence appears first in numbers, in the careful mathematics that Game Freak embedded within their legendary Pokémon. The creation trio each possesses a base stat total of 680, a sacred number that marks them as equals in power and purpose. Their individual stats are distributed differently, reflecting their unique natures, but the sum remains constant across all three. When you examine the Tau trio from the Unova region, the same number appears again, as if echoing across regions and generations, suggesting a connection that goes deeper than coincidence. Reshiram, the vast white Pokémon, carries 680 base stats, distributed in a pattern that mirrors Dialga almost perfectly. Only the defense and special defense values are swapped, creating a reflection rather than a copy. This parallel is too precise to be accidental, too deliberate to ignore. Zekrom, the deep black Pokémon, also reaches 680 total stats, though its distribution diverges more dramatically from the creation dragons, emphasizing physical attack in ways that none of the original three do. And then there is Kyurem. Kyurem's base stats tell a strange story. Its total also reaches 680, maintaining the sacred number, but the distribution feels fragmented, incomplete, as if the stats were divided hastily or torn apart rather than carefully designed. Both defensive stats sit lower than any member of either trio, creating weaknesses that seem uncharacteristic for a legendary Pokemon of this caliber. The attack stats balance between Reshiram's special focus and Zekrom's physical emphasis, straddling the middle ground without committing fully to either path. It is a stat spread that suggests incompleteness, as if Kyurem is not a whole being, but rather the remainder of something that was once greater. The typing of the Tau trio reinforces this connection to plasma and energy. Reshiram wields fire with such intensity that flames turn white, reaching temperatures where matter begins to break down into plasma. Its signature ability, Turbo Blaze, ignores other abilities entirely, burning through defensive measures with pure, overwhelming force. Zekrom commands electricity, the most recognizable form of plasma in everyday experience, its body generating storms and lightning that can reshape battlefields. Together, those two dragons embody the dual nature of plasma as both thermal and electrical energy, the two most common natural forms of this fourth state of matter. Their connection to Taoism adds another layer of meaning to this relationship. Reshiram represents Yang, the active, bright, masculine principle that seeks truth through action and illumination. It burns away falsehood with white fire, leaving only what is real and verified. Zekrom embodies Yin, the passive, dark, feminine principle that pursues ideals through restraint and potential. It holds power in reserve, allowing electricity to build until the moment of release. The Tao philosophy teaches that these two forces are complementary rather than opposed, that reality requires both to function, and that separation between them creates imbalance. The legend of the original dragon tells of a time before this division existed. According to stories preserved in Unova, twin heroes once commanded a single powerful dragon, using its strength to found the region and bring civilization to the land. This dragon was said to be unmatched in power, a force of nature that could reshape geography and climate with its presence. But the twin heroes began to disagree, each seeking different things from life and from their shared companion. The older brother valued truth above all else, the observable, verifiable facts of existence. The younger brother cherished ideals, the aspirational visions of what could be rather than merely what is. Their conflict grew until the dragon itself could no longer serve both masters. The creature split in two, dividing along philosophical lines, creating Reshiram to fight for truth and Zekrom to champion ideals. The war between the brothers and their dragons nearly destroyed Unova, ending only when both sides recognized that neither truth nor ideals alone could sustain a civilization. But the legend, as it was first told, made no mention of Kyurem, suggesting that this third dragon was not part of the original split, but rather something created or discovered later. A different version of the story emerged in the sequels to Black and White. Drayden, the Opelucid city gym leader and a scholar of Unovan history, shared an alternate interpretation of events. In this telling, when the original dragon divided into Reshiram and Zekrom, a third entity was created from what remained from the pieces that could not align fully with either truth or ideals. Kyurem in this version is not a separate dragon that arrived from space, but rather the husk left behind when the original dragon tore itself apart. It is the emptiness, the absence, the hollow shell that once contained both light and dark before they separated into distinct beings. The Pokédex entries for Kyurem support this interpretation. Multiple entries describe it as waiting for a hero who can fill its missing parts with either truth or ideals, suggesting that Kyurem is fundamentally incomplete, that it lacks something essential that was taken when the split occurred. The creature is said to generate immense cold, not as a primary power, but as a consequence of its incompleteness, as if the absence within it draws heat from the surrounding environment, creating the ice that covers its body and the frozen wasteland where it dwells. When Kyurem fuses with either Reshiram or Zekrom, the transformation reveals the truth of its nature. White Kyurem, formed by absorbing Reshiram, gains access to fire and heat, filling the void with light and truth. Black Kyurem, merged with Zekrom, channels electricity and ideals, completing the circuit that was broken. In both forms, Kyurem becomes more than it was alone, approaching the power and presence of the original dragon. But these fusions are imperfect, incomplete, because Kyurem can only merge with one of its counterparts at a time, never recombining all three pieces into the unified whole that once existed. The plasma connection becomes clearest when you examine what each dragon represents. Reshiram's white flames are not mere fire but plasma in its thermal form, matter heated beyond the point where molecular bonds can hold, electrons stripped away by pure energy. Zekrom's electricity is plasma in its electrical form, ionized particles flowing along paths of least resistance, creating the lightning and thunder that accompany its presence. Kyurem, frozen and incomplete, represents the absence of plasma, the state where energy has been withdrawn, leaving only cold and stillness in its wake. Together, the three dragons of Unova would recreate the original dragon, the fourth member of Arceus's creation pantheon, the guardian of energy and plasma that once stood alongside Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina. This original dragon would have commanded all forms of plasma, from the flames of stars to the lightning of storms, from the aurora that dances in polar skies to the cosmic rays that stream through space. It would have been energy incarnate, a being of pure power that maintained the boundary between matter and light, ensuring that the universe could support both stable forms and dynamic transformation. If you're still awake halfway through, maybe subscribe before you drift off, and tell me what time it is where you're watching from. The question then becomes not whether this fourth creation existed, but why it no longer serves in its intended role. Why would Arceus allow, or perhaps cause one of its primary guardians to fracture into lesser forms? The answer may lie in the nature of energy itself, in the inherent instability of plasma compared to the other states of matter. Solids are stable, maintaining their structure across time. Liquids are adaptive, flowing but cohesive. Gases are diffuse, but predictable in their behavior. But plasma is volatile, unstable, prone to sudden shifts and catastrophic releases of power. A guardian of energy and plasma would necessarily be more difficult to control than its counterparts. Where Dialga's steel body anchors it to the flow of time, and Palkia's water form allows it to navigate space smoothly, and Giratina's ghost typing lets it phase through antimatter without resistance, a plasma-based guardian would be in constant flux, always shifting, always on the verge of transformation. The original dragon may have been too powerful, too unstable, too prone to respond to emotional and philosophical conflicts in ways that threatened the fabric of reality itself. The split of the original dragon occurred in response to conflict between its human masters, suggesting that unlike the creation trio, which serve Arceus directly and remain aloof from human affairs, the fourth guardian became entangled with mortal concerns. It chose to serve the twin heroes, binding itself to their will and their disputes. When they could not reconcile their differences, the dragon reflected that division, splitting itself to satisfy both masters, even though doing so violated its essential nature as a unified embodiment of energy. This may have been the mistake, the reason why Arceus's fourth creation is no longer counted among the primary guardians, not because the dragon itself was flawed, but because it became too involved with humanity, allowing mortal philosophy and emotion to override its cosmic purpose. The creation trio exists outside of human concerns, maintaining the fundamental structures of reality regardless of what civilizations rise or fall. But the original dragon descended from that detached position, choosing to serve and be served by humans, and in doing so, it made itself vulnerable to the same conflicts and divisions that plague mortal beings. The consequences of this choice ripple through Unova, even in the present day. The region's geography bears the scars of ancient battles between truth and ideals, between light and dark, between the divided halves of what was once whole. The giant chasm where Kyurem dwells is said to have been created by a meteor impact, but older legends suggest it might instead be the crater left by the original dragon's split, the physical wound in the earth reflecting the spiritual wound in the guardian itself. The landscape around the chasm remains frozen year-round, as if the cold emanating from Kyurem's incomplete form affects not just the air, but time and space themselves. Dragon Spiral Tower stands as another monument to this lost history. The structure reaches toward the sky, its architecture ancient beyond counting, said to be a place where legendary Pokémon are created and where they return to rest. In the original Black and White games, the tower held one of the legendary stones, either the light stone containing Reshiram or the dark stone holding Zekrom, waiting for a hero worthy of awakening the dragon within. The tower's connection to dragon-type legendaries suggests it may have been built as a shrine to the original dragon, a place where the unified guardian could rest between its duties before the division occurred. The presence of the three creation orbs in Unova provides another thread of evidence. The adamant orb, lustrous orb, and griseous orb are artifacts tied directly to Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina, empowering them and focusing their abilities when held. These orbs appear in Dragon Spiral Tower during the events of Black 2 and White 2, far from their native Sinnoh region, as if drawn there by some connection to the place or its history. Their presence in the same location where legendary dragons sleep and where pieces of the original dragon are found cannot be coincidental. Ghetsis, the true antagonist of Team Plasma, showed unusual interest in these orbs during the post-game events of the first generation of Unova games. Though his plans were never fully revealed before he ordered his subordinates to hand the orbs over to the player, there are hints that he understood their significance, that he sought to use them in conjunction with the legendary dragons of Unova. Perhaps he intended to use the power of the Creation Trio's artifacts to force a complete fusion of the Tau Trio, to recreate the original dragon and command its power for his own purposes. The presence of the late guardians in Unova adds yet another layer to this connection. Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf are Arceus's second tier of creation, Pokémon designed to grant humans knowledge, emotion, and willpower respectively. They normally dwell in Sinnoh, guarding the three lakes that anchor reality in that region, but in Black 2 and White 2, all three appear in Unova, drawn there by events or forces unknown. Their placement in the region feels intentional, meaningful, as if they were pulled across regions by the presence of fragments of the fourth creation dragon. Uxie appears at Nacrene City, specifically in the area where one of the legendary stones was once held in the museum before the player claimed it years earlier. Uxie represents knowledge, and its presence near the stone suggests it may have been observing or guarding the dormant dragon, ensuring that knowledge of what it once was and could become again is not lost. Mesprit travels to the top of Celestial Tower, a structure dedicated to mourning deceased Pokémon, where the souls of the departed are said to ring the bell at the summit as they pass on. Mesprit embodies emotion, and its choice of this location might represent grief for what was lost when the original dragon divided, a mourning for the death of unity. Hazelf appears on Route 23, the final path trainers must walk before challenging the Pokémon League, a road that runs directly adjacent to the giant chasm where Kyurem makes its home. A Zelf represents willpower, and its proximity to Kyurem might symbolize the dragon's will to become whole again, its determination to wait however long necessary for a hero who can reunite the scattered pieces. The Lake Guardian's presence in Unova suggests that Arceus has not forgotten its fourth creation, that the original god still watches over the fragments of what was once a unified guardian. The stones themselves carry significance beyond their immediate function. The Light Stone and Dark Stone are not mere vessels for dormant legendary Pokémon, but transformations, states that Reshiram and Zekrom enter when they lack a human partner to give them purpose. The stones are smooth, round, and elegant, resembling the orbs held by the creation trio, but not identical to them. They represent a different kind of artifact, one tied to human connection rather than cosmic authority, suggesting that Reshiram and Zekrom have moved away from their original purpose as parts of a creation dragon to become something more dependent on mortal beliefs and needs. Hidden within the code of the Generation 5 games, data miners discovered an unused item called the Godstone. Its sprite resembles both the Lightstone and Darkstone, but distinct from both, suggesting it was meant to be a third stone of similar importance. The name alone is provocative, implying a connection to Arceus or to godhood itself, hinting that this stone might have been intended for Kyurem. If the Lightstone embodies truth and the Darkstone embodies ideals, then the Godstone might represent the unity of both, or perhaps something that transcends the duality entirely. The Godstone was never implemented in any released version of the games, leaving its intended purpose to speculation. Some theories suggest it was a prototype, an early concept for the light and dark stones that was abandoned once the developers decided to split the original dragon into two rather than three. But another interpretation holds that the Godstone remains planned for future use, perhaps in a Legends game set in Unova, or in a theoretical game that would finally allow the complete reunification of the Tau trio into their original form. If such a stone exists or will exist, it would need to be created through some process that combines the light stone, the dark stone, and perhaps the essence of Kyurem itself. The alchemical symbolism present in the Tau trio suggests a possible method. In alchemy, the union of opposites through a mediating force creates transformation and perfection. Reshiram represents sulfur, the soul of the principle of combustibility and spiritual wisdom. Zekrom represents Mercury, the spirit, the active force of change and transformation. Kyurem represents salt, the body, the grounding force that binds soul and spirit together into a unified whole. In alchemical tradition, combining these three principles in the correct proportions and under the right conditions produces the Philosopher's Stone, the legendary substance that can transmute base metals into gold and grant immortality. The Godstone, in this interpretation, would be the Pokémon universe's equivalent, an artifact created by combining truth, ideals, and the empty vessel that once held both, resulting in a key that could unlock the original dragon's true form and restore Arceus' fourth creation to its intended role. The move Try attack offers another small piece of evidence for this theory. This attack, which combines fire, ice, and electricity into a single strike, has existed in Pokémon since the first generation, but its thematic elements align perfectly with the Tau trio. Reshiram learns Flamethrower, Kyurem learns Ice Beam, and Zekrom learns Thunderbolt. Each dragon masters one component of Try attack, suggesting that when unified, the original dragon would have wielded all three elements simultaneously, combining heat, cold, and electricity into a perfect expression of plasma's diverse forms. The fact that Try attack predates the Tau trio by multiple generations raises interesting questions about whether Game Freak had been planning this connection from the beginning, or whether they looked back at existing moves and found thematic resonance that they then developed into the Unova legendaries. Either way, the connection exists, and it suggests that the original dragon's signature move would have been something that combined these three elements, creating an attack that represented the full spectrum of plasma states. Beyond the direct evidence and symbolic connections, there are quieter details that suggest the original dragon's influence on Unova's culture and mythology. The region places great emphasis on duality and balance, on the tension between opposing forces and the impossibility of choosing one without acknowledging the other. The Opelucid City Gym embodies this, with its version exclusive theming appearing as a high tech metropolis in black and a traditional historical site in white, showing how the same place can manifest differently depending on which truth or ideal you pursue. The entire plot of Generation 5 centers around questions of liberation and control, about whether Pokemon should be free from human trainers, or whether the partnership between species serves both sides. Team Plasma, despite their villainous execution, raises legitimate philosophical questions about the ethics of capturing wild creatures and compelling them to fight. These themes of division, conflict, and the search for synthesis reflect the underlying story of the original dragon, the way it split under the pressure of incompatible philosophies and left behind fragments that yearn for reunion. In The Enigmatic Trainer Who Believes He Can Hear Pokemon's Voices serves as a modern parallel to the ancient heroes. He is raised by Getsus to believe in an ideal world where Pokemon and humans are separated, protected from each other's influence. But through his journey and rivalry with the player, N comes to understand that truth and ideals are not incompatible, that reality requires both observation and aspiration, that the partnership between Pokemon and humans, while imperfect, is not inherently wrong. His character arc mirrors the potential reunion of the Tao Trio, suggesting that what was divided can be made whole again through understanding rather than force. The seasonal cycle unique to Unova also reflects the themes of transformation and incompleteness. Unlike other regions where time passes but the environment remains largely static, Unova changes dramatically with each passing month, cycling through spring, summer, autumn, and winter in endless rotation. This constant change mirrors the unstable nature of plasma and energy, the way the fourth state of matter refuses to remain static, always transforming, always in flux. The fact that Kyurem generates eternal winter in the giant chasm, freezing time in a single season, suggests that its incompleteness has damaged this natural cycle, creating a wound in the world's rhythm. The mythology of dragons plays a larger role in Unova than in most other regions. While dragon-type Pokemon exist everywhere, Unova's legendaries are dominated by dragons to an unusual degree. Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem are all dragon types, as are the forces of nature in their Therian forms, and the Tao Trio's dominance over the region's legendary pantheon suggests that dragons hold special significance in this part of the world. This focus might stem from the presence or former presence of the original dragon, from a time when Arceus's fourth creation dwelled in Unova and shaped the region's spiritual landscape. The presence of the Dragon Spiral Tower as a site where legendary Pokemon are created raises profound questions about the original dragon's relationship to Arceus. If the tower is truly a place of creation, then perhaps it was built by or for Arceus as a workshop, a location where the god of Pokemon could craft new legendaries away from the Hall of Origin. The original dragon might have been created there, brought into being in Unova rather than in Sinnoh with the rest of the creation trio, which would explain why its fragments remain in that region. Alternatively, the tower might have been built by the original dragon itself or by humans in honor of it, a monument to the fourth creation and its role in shaping reality. The architecture of the tower, with its spiraling ascent toward the sky and its dragon motifs, suggests reverence and aspiration, or reaching towards something higher. If the original dragon was indeed more involved with human civilization than the creation trio, then such a monument would make sense, a way for ancient Unavans to honor their guardian and maintain connection with it. The genetic connection between the creation trio and the Tau trio extends beyond base stats into ability design and move pools. Dialga's pressure ability reflects its role as the master of time, forcing opponents to expend more energy to act in its presence, as if time itself weighs more heavily around the temporal dragon. Palkia also has pressure, suggesting a similar relationship to space, where the boundaries between positions become harder to cross. Giratina possesses pressure as well in its altered form, maintaining the pattern, though its origin form gains levitate instead. Reshiram and Zekrom each have unique abilities that ignore other abilities entirely. Turbo Blaze allows Reshiram to strike through defensive abilities as if they don't exist, burning so hot that protective measures simply vaporize. Terravolt gives Zekrom the same quality, its electricity overwhelming any resistance or immunity. These abilities suggest a power level comparable to the creation trio, an ability to override the normal rules of battle through sheer legendary authority. Kyurem, however, has only pressure in its base form, again suggesting incompleteness, though its fused forms gain Turbo Blaze or Terravolt from their merged partners. The signature moves of each dragon also tell a story about their nature and relationship. Dialga's Roar of Time and Palkia's Spatial Rend are both devastatingly powerful attacks that require a turn to recharge afterward, as if manipulating the fundamental forces of time and space exhausts even these legendary Pokémon. Giratina's Shadow Force allows it to vanish into antimatter for a turn before striking, phasing out of reality itself. These moves reflect their domains, their control over aspects of existence that normal Pokémon cannot touch. Reshiram's Blue Flare and Zekrom's Bolt Strike serve similar purposes, massive attacks of fire and electricity that define these dragons' combat styles, but Kyurem's signature move in its base form is Glaciate, an ice attack that slows opponents, reducing their speed as if freezing them in place. The move is powerful, but defensive, controlling rather than overwhelming, which fits Kyurem's role as the empty shell, the remnant that lacks the overwhelming offensive presence of its counterparts. Only in its fused forms does Kyurem gain access to Ice Burn or Freeze Shock, hybrid moves that combine ice with fire or electricity, finally allowing it to wield Plasma's power. These fused forms themselves provide insight into what the original dragon might have been. White Kyurem combines ice and fire, cold and heat, creating a Pokémon that embodies the full temperature spectrum. Its stats shift heavily towards special attack, and its ability to learn both Fusion Flare and Ice Burn gives it access to the thermal aspect of Plasma in both its extreme forms. Black Kyurem merges ice and electricity, stillness and motion, generating a physical powerhouse that can channel Fusion Bolt and Freeze Shock, wielding Plasma's electrical nature alongside its frozen absence. If both fusions could occur simultaneously, if Kyurem could somehow absorb both Reshiram and Zekrom at once, the resulting Pokémon would presumably be the original dragon, a being that commands fire, ice, and electricity in perfect balance, that embodies all forms of plasma and energy, that represents the fourth state of matter in its entirety. Such a Pokémon would rival Arceus itself in power, which may be precisely why the fusion remains impossible within the game mechanics, why the original dragon is kept divided and dormant. The danger of reuniting the original dragon might be too great to risk. If the creature's power approaches that of Arceus, then its reformation could destabilize the hierarchy of legendary Pokémon, potentially challenging the creator's authority. Arceus designed each member of the creation trio to be powerful but limited, masters of their individual domains, but unable to interfere with each other's territories. A unified energy dragon would not have such limitations, would be able to affect time, space, and antimatter through the application of raw power, creating the potential for catastrophic interference with reality's fundamental structures. The division of the original dragon might therefore have been intentional on Arceus's part, a controlled fragmentation designed to prevent the fourth creation from becoming a threat. By allowing or causing the dragon to split in response to human conflict, Arceus ensured that its most powerful and unstable creation would remain in a state of reduced capability, unable to exercise the full extent of its cosmic authority. The tragedy, from the dragon's perspective, is that it became a tool of this divine strategy, manipulated into division by forces that may have included its own creator. This interpretation casts Arceus in a more complex light, suggesting that the Pokemon of myth is not purely benevolent, but pragmatic, willing to sacrifice the well-being of its creations to maintain cosmic order. The original dragon's mistake was not in its creation or nature, but in its potential, in the threat it posed simply by existing at full power. Its entanglement with humanity gave Arceus the opportunity to resolve this threat, allowing the dragon to divide itself rather than forcing the issue, preserving the illusion that Arceus had not deliberately weakened one of its own children. The Lake Guardian's journey to Unova takes on darker implications under this reading. Perhaps they were sent by Arceus, not to observe or protect, but to ensure that the Tau trio remains divided, that no one successfully recreates the Godstone or discovers the method to completely reunify the original dragon. Uxie would guard knowledge, ensuring that the secrets of fusion remain incomplete. Mesprit would monitor the emotional bonds between the dragons and potential heroes, preventing the kind of perfect understanding that might enable true reunion. Azelf would test the will of those who seek the dragons, ensuring that only trainers who will maintain the status quo can claim them. Yet the Pokemon world contains examples of legendary Pokemon that have been reunified after separation. Calyrex can bond with either Glastrier or Spectrier, reclaiming the steeds that once served it and restoring a fraction of its ancient power. The various forms of Necrozma show a Pokemon desperately trying to reclaim lost light and power, absorbing other legendaries in an attempt to return to its original Ultra form. These precedents suggest that divided legendaries can be made whole again, that fusion and reformation are possible within the world's rules. The key difference may be that those other legendaries are attempting to restore themselves without challenging Arceus's fundamental design of reality. Calyrex's reunion with its steeds does not threaten the domains of time, space, or antimatter. Necrozma's absorption of light, while destructive, operates on a regional rather than cosmic scale. But the original dragon, if fully restored, would represent an alternative to the current creation pantheon, a fourth pillar of reality that Arceus decided to remove or diminish. Its restoration would be an act of defiance against divine will, a rejection of the current cosmic order. This may explain why the Godstone remains unused, why the games have never provided a method to fuse all three members of the Tau trio simultaneously. The developers, whether consciously or not, may be reflecting Arceus's will, maintaining the division as part of the world's fundamental rules. Players can access White Kyurem or Black Kyurem, can experience fragments of what the original dragon might have been, but the complete restoration remains forever out of reach, always one piece short of completion. The emotional resonance of this situation is profound. Kyurem, as the empty remnant, is perhaps the most tragic legendary Pokemon in the entire series. It did not choose division, did not ask to be incomplete, but exists in a state of perpetual longing for a wholeness it can never achieve. Its Pokédex entries consistently describe it as waiting, hoping, yearning for a hero who can fill its missing parts, but the hero who could truly complete it would need to possess both truth and ideals simultaneously, would need to reject the very premise of choosing between them. Such a hero might be impossible by definition. The human mind struggles to hold contradictory truths, to believe simultaneously in observable fact and aspirational vision without allowing one to dominate the other. The twin heroes of ancient Unova could not do it, each choosing a side and dividing the dragon in the process. N and the player approach this balance but never quite achieve it, each representing one side more than the other, until a human appears who can truly embody both truth and ideals without compromising either. Kyurem will remain incomplete. Perhaps this is the real mistake of Arceus's fourth creation. Not that it was flawed or dangerous, but that it required something from humanity that humanity cannot provide. The creation trio serves cosmic functions that have nothing to do with human nature or development. They would maintain time, space, and antimatter, regardless of whether humans existed. But the original dragon, as the guardian of energy and transformation, would have needed to interact with conscious beings, with creatures capable of growth and change. And in that interaction, it became vulnerable to human limitations and conflicts. The mistake, then, was creating a cosmic guardian that could be affected by mortal philosophy, that could fracture under the weight of human disagreement. Arceus designed the fourth creation to embody energy, the force of change and transformation, but in doing so created something that was itself too susceptible to change, too responsive to external influence. A proper cosmic guardian should be immutable, eternal, unchanging regardless of what lesser beings think or feel. The original dragon failed this test, proving that energy and stability are fundamentally incompatible, that a guardian of transformation cannot itself remain transformed. The Unova region continues to bear the consequences of this ancient mistake. Its seasonal changes reflect the instability, the constant transformation that the original dragon would have governed. Its emphasis on duality and conflict mirrors the split that shattered the fourth creation. Its legendary Pokémon remain divided, waiting for a reunion that the cosmos itself may be designed to prevent. And somewhere in the giant chasm, Kyurem generates endless cold, not as a power, but as an absence, the place where energy should be, but isn't, the hollow where a guardian used to stand. Players who encounter Kyurem often report an unsettling experience, a sense that something is wrong with this legendary Pokémon in ways that go beyond its fearsome appearance. Its cry sounds harsh and broken, unlike the majestic roars of Reshiram and Zekrom. Its movements seem jerky and incomplete, as if parts of its body don't quite connect to the whole. The ice that covers it appears more like a prison than armor, freezing the dragon in place rather than protecting it. Everything about Kyurem suggests damage, incompletion, a creature that exists in a state of permanent suffering. This suffering may be the cost of Arceus's mistake, the price paid by the fourth creation for being designed in a way that allowed division. If the original dragon possessed consciousness and will, if it experienced the split as trauma rather than transformation, then its three fragments each carry a portion of that pain. Reshiram's endless burning might be an attempt to cauterize the wound, to seal the place where Zekrom was torn away. Zekrom's constant electricity might be the nervous system firing without pattern, trying to reconnect circuits that no longer have anywhere to lead. And Kyurem's frozen stillness might be shock, the catatonic state of a being whose core has been removed. The stones that Reshiram and Zekrom become when dormant might represent a defensive mechanism, a way to escape the pain of incompletion by entering a state where consciousness fades and only potential remains. In stone form, the dragons don't have to experience their divided nature, don't have to feel the absence of their missing pieces. Only when a hero awakens them do they resume active existence, and even then they serve that hero's truth or ideals, filling the void within themselves with human conviction because they no longer possess enough coherent identity to generate their own purpose. Curum cannot become a stone, cannot escape into dormancy, because it is the part that was meant to hold the whole together. It is consciousness without conviction, structure without purpose, the skeleton that remains when the flesh is stripped away. Its ice might be a self imposed prison, a way to contain the pain and prevent itself from lashing out in agony at the world around it. The frozen wasteland of Giant Chasm might not be an environment Kyurem creates deliberately, but rather the natural consequence of its existence, the way reality itself recoils from contact with something so fundamentally incomplete. Ichio, the DNA splicers, the items that allow Kyurem to fuse with Reshiram or Zekrom, appear in the games without clear explanation of their origin. They are simply found lying in a particular location, ancient artifacts whose creation and purpose remain mysterious. But their name suggests this genetic manipulation, the ability to splice together the DNA of separate beings into a unified whole. If such technology exists in the Pokémon world, it implies a level of understanding of legendary Pokémon biology that seems almost blasphemous, a scientific intrusion into divine creation. Perhaps the DNA splicers were created by ancient humans who understood what had happened to the original dragon and sought to repair the damage. Their efforts produced only partial success, creating the fused forms that combine two of the three fragments, but never all three at once. The limitation might be technological, a matter of the splicers not being powerful enough or precise enough to manage a three-way fusion. Or it might be metaphysical, a consequence of the fundamental incompatibility between truth and ideals, the impossibility of combining opposite principles without a mediating force. If the Godstone exists, it might serve as that mediating force, providing the metaphysical framework that would allow all three dragons to coexist in a single body without their opposing natures tearing the fusion apart. The stone would represent the principle that transcends both truth and ideals, the recognition that reality requires both, and that choosing between them is a false dilemma. Such a stone would be extraordinarily difficult to create, requiring not just the combination of the light and dark stones, but a fundamental transformation of what those stones represent. Alchemically, this would be the moment of conjunction, where opposites unite through the application of fire and pressure, destroying their individual identities to create something new. The process would require the willing sacrifice of both Reshiram and Zekrom, their acceptance that reunion means the death of their current selves, that the original dragon cannot be restored while they persist as individuals. And it would require Kyurem to accept wholeness, to release its frozen defense and allow itself to be filled with the energies it has spent so long holding at bay. The psychological barriers to such a reunion might be higher than the physical ones. Reshiram has built an identity around truth, around the validation of observable reality and the rejection of comfortable lies. Zekrom has constructed itself around ideals, around the pursuit of what could be, rather than mere acceptance of what is. Both dragons have found purpose in their division, have created meaning from their incompleteness. To reunify would be to admit that this purpose was always partial, always a substitute for something greater that was lost. Kyurem's acceptance might be even harder to achieve. The empty remnant has defined itself by absence, by waiting, by the hope that someone else will eventually provide what it lacks. To reunify would mean abandoning that hope, releasing the identity of victim or supplicant that has sustained it through ages of isolation. It would mean taking responsibility for its own wholeness, actively choosing to reclaim what was taken rather than passively waiting for restoration. Such a choice requires a degree of will and self-assertion that Kyurem, by its very nature, may no longer possess. The hero who could facilitate this reunion would need to help all three dragons overcome their psychological barriers, convincing Reshiram and Zekrom to release their hard-won identities, and showing Kyurem that it has the strength to be whole again. This hero would need to embody both truth and ideals so completely that the dragons could see in them a model for how opposites can coexist without conflict. They would need to demonstrate that wholeness is not the same as uniformity, that the original dragon can contain both truth and ideals without requiring them to merge into a bland compromise. Such a hero has not yet appeared in any Pokemon game. The protagonists of Black and White, while exemplary trainers, each lean more toward one principle than the other. The player pursues truth through their journey, discovering the reality behind Team Plasma's idealistic rhetoric. N pursues ideals, maintaining his vision of Pokemon liberation even as evidence mounts that his worldview is incomplete. Their rivalry helps both characters grow toward a more balanced perspective, but neither fully achieves the synthesis that would be required to reunite the original dragon. Future games set in Unova might introduce this hero, might finally provide the narrative framework for the Tau Trio's complete reunion. Legends. Unova, if such a game is ever made, would be the perfect venue for this story, taking players back to the era of the twin heroes and allowing them to witness or perhaps prevent the original division. Alternatively, a sequel to Black 2 and White 2 could move the story forward, introducing a new character who has learned from the mistakes of the past and approaches the legendary dragons with the wisdom needed to make them whole. The cultural impact of revealing the original dragon would be significant. Players have speculated about this possibility for years, creating fan art and theories about what the combined form might look like, what stats and abilities it might possess, what role it would play in the story. The actual implementation would need to balance fan expectations with narrative coherence, creating a Pokemon that feels worthy of its build-up while remaining consistent with established lore. Mechanically, the original dragon would likely have a base stat total higher than 680, reflecting the power gained from true synthesis rather than mere addition. Perhaps 720, matching or exceeding some of the most powerful legendaries in the series. Its typing would almost certainly be dragon, combined with something that represents energy or plasma more directly than fire or electric alone. Dragon/light would be thematically appropriate if Game Freak ever introduces a light type, or perhaps dragon/normal, representing the baseline states from which all other types derive. Its ability would need to reflect its role as a guardian of energy and transformation, something that affects all types or all forms of energy, perhaps an ability that changes the power or effectiveness of fire, electric, and ice moves used on the field, harmonizing these elements rather than opposing them, or an ability that allows the dragon to change its own typing based on the move it's using, embodying the transformative nature of plasma that can exist in multiple states simultaneously. The move pool would combine the signature moves of all three fragments, giving the original dragon access to Blue Flare, Bolt Strike, and Glaciate, along with Fusion Flare, Fusion Bolt, Ice Burn, and Freeze Shock. It might gain a new signature move that combines all three elements, a plasma attack that deals fire, electric, and ice damage simultaneously, overwhelming opponents with the full spectrum of energy types. Such a move would be devastatingly powerful, requiring a recharge turn or significant drawback to balance its offensive potential. The design of the original dragon itself remains a matter of speculation. It would presumably combine visual elements from Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem, incorporating white and black coloration, feathered and organic textures, mechanical and crystalline details. Some fan interpretations depict it as elegant and harmonious, a perfect fusion where all three parts flow seamlessly together. Others imagine it as more chaotic, a being whose power comes from controlled tension between its constituent elements, always on the verge of splitting apart but held together by sheer will. The emotional tone of encountering the original dragon would differ markedly from meeting its fragments. Reshiram inspires awe with its graceful power. Zekrom commands respect through its overwhelming presence, and Kyurem evokes pity or discomfort with its obvious incompleteness. The original dragon would need to synthesize these reactions, creating a sense of encountering something beyond normal categories, a being that is simultaneously beautiful and terrible, inspiring both attraction and fear in equal measure. Its role in the world would also need clarification. If the original dragon is reunified, does it resume its position as Arceus's fourth creation, taking its place alongside the creation trio? Or has too much time passed, too much changed, for it to reclaim its cosmic responsibilities? Perhaps the reunion would reveal that the guardian of energy is no longer needed, that the universe has adapted to its absence and created alternative mechanisms for managing plasma and transformation. The original dragon would then be a relic, powerful but purposeless, forced to find new meaning in a cosmos that has moved on without it. Alternatively, the reunion might trigger a cosmic crisis, revealing that the universe has been slowly degrading in the absence of proper energy governance, that the imbalance between solid, liquid, and gas without plasma has been creating problems that only become apparent once the fourth guardian returns. This would give the original dragon a clear purpose, a mission to repair the damage caused by its own absence, redeeming itself by fixing problems that it inadvertently created through its division. The relationship between the original dragon and Arceus would also need to be addressed. Does Arceus welcome the return of its fourth creation, or does it view the reunion as a challenge to its authority, a rejection of its decision to allow or cause the division? A confrontation between creator and creation would be narratively powerful, forcing both to acknowledge the mistakes that led to the current situation and decide whether they can move forward together or if the rift between them is now too fundamental to bridge. Such a confrontation would also raise questions about Arceus's fallibility. The god of Pokémon is generally portrayed as benevolent and wise, a perfect being whose decisions are beyond question. But if Arceus made a mistake in creating the fourth guardian, if it regrets allowing the division or wishes it had designed the energy dragon differently, then the game's cosmology becomes more complex and morally ambiguous. Arceus would be revealed as a flawed creator, powerful but not omniscient, capable of errors that have lasting consequences for its creations and the universe they inhabit. This darker interpretation of Pokemon mythology would align with some of the more unsettling Pokedex entries and implied lore from across the series. The Pokemon world is not a perfect paradise, but a place where suffering exists, where creatures die and legendaries conflict, and the natural order contains cruelty alongside beauty. Arceus's mistake in creating a fourth guardian that could fracture under mortal influence would fit this pattern, suggesting that even divine beings must live with the consequences of their choices, that power does not grant immunity from error or regret. The human element in all of this cannot be overlooked. The twin heroes who caused the original dragon to split bear responsibility for what happened, their inability to reconcile their different philosophies, directly leading to catastrophe. But the story also suggests that future humans might be able to repair what their ancestors broke, that wisdom and understanding could achieve what force and ideology could not. This redemptive arc would be thematically appropriate for Pokemon, which consistently emphasizes growth, learning, and the power of bonds between humans and Pokemon. The player, as the protagonist of such a story, would need to demonstrate this growth explicitly, not just by being a strong trainer who can capture legendary Pokemon, but by showing wisdom in how they approach the task. Perhaps the reunion could only be triggered through a series of choices that demonstrate balanced judgment, situations where the player must choose between truth and ideals in ways that show understanding of both rather than favoring one side. A morality system, rare in Pokemon games, might track these choices and unlock the reunion only for players who achieve true balance. The narrative conclusion of reuniting the original dragon would also need to address what happens to the individualities of Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem. Do they cease to exist as separate consciousnesses, absorbed entirely into the original dragon's unified mind? Or do they persist somehow, existing as facets of a more complex whole, able to manifest separately when needed, but no longer feeling incomplete when divided? The answer would have significant implications for how we understand legendary Pokemon identity and whether fusion is additive or transformative. If the individual dragons cease to exist, the reunion becomes a kind of death, a sacrifice required to restore cosmic balance. Players who have bonded with Reshiram or Zekrom, or even Kyurem, might feel reluctant to trigger this ending, knowing it means losing the individual Pokemon they have come to know. The game would need to acknowledge this emotional weight, treating the reunion as a bittersweet victory rather than an unambiguous happy ending. If the individual dragons persist as facets of the whole, the reunion becomes more like a healing, a restoration of full capacity rather than a destruction of identity. The original dragon would contain all three personalities, able to think and feel in ways that reflect truth, ideals, and the synthesis between them. This version would be more palatable to players, but might feel less mythologically significant, reducing what should be a profound transformation into mere addition rather than transcendence. The final question is whether Game Freak will ever actually depict the reunification of the Tau trio. They have teased the concept repeatedly, providing lore and items that point toward this possibility without actually implementing it. Each new generation of games brings speculation that this might be the one where the original dragon finally appears, and each time the speculation goes unfulfilled. This ongoing delay might be intentional, a way to maintain narrative tension and keep players engaged with Univon mythology across multiple game releases. Or it might reflect genuine uncertainty about how to handle such a significant lore event. The reunification of the original dragon would be one of the most important moments in Pokemon mythology, comparable to encountering Arceus itself or witnessing the birth of a new legendary. Getting it wrong could damage the franchise's lore coherence and disappoint fans who have been waiting years for this revelation. Game Freak might be holding back until they are confident they can execute the concept in a way that does justice to its importance. As we drift toward the end of this exploration, it's worth considering what the story of Arceus' fourth creation ultimately means. On one level, it's an explanation for perceived gaps in Pokemon lore, a theory that accounts for the apparent absence of a plasma-based member of the creation pantheon. But on a deeper level, it's a story about the costs of power and the dangers of creating beings that can be influenced by mortal concerns. It's about the tragedy of division and the difficulty of achieving true synthesis between opposing principles. The original dragon, if it existed and was deliberately or accidentally divided, represents both a mistake and a lesson. The mistake was creating something too powerful to be stable, too responsive to change to maintain cosmic order. The lesson is that some divisions, once made, are extraordinarily difficult to repair, that breaking something is always easier than making it whole again. And perhaps the deepest lesson is that mistakes, even cosmic ones, continue to echo through time, shaping the world in ways that persist long after the original error occurred. Kyurem's endless wait for completion mirrors the human condition in some ways, the sense that we are all incomplete, all missing pieces that we hope someone or something else will provide. The idea that wholeness might require us to change fundamentally, to release defensive mechanisms and accept vulnerability, resonates beyond the confines of Pokemon lore. We see in Kyurem's frozen isolation our own fear of transformation, our reluctance to release what we know for the uncertainty of what we might become, and in the twin heroes' inability to reconcile truth and ideals, we see our own struggles with similar conflicts. The tension between what is and what should be, between accepting reality and pursuing vision, affects every human life and every human civilization. The fact that this conflict was powerful enough to shatter a cosmic guardian suggests that these forces are not trivial, that philosophy and ideology have real power to shape events, even on cosmic scales. The original Dragon's division reminds us that ideas matter, that beliefs have consequences that extend far beyond the individuals who hold them. The hope of reunion, however remote, offers a counterbalance to this darkness. If the original dragon can be made whole again, if truth and ideals can coexist in a single being without destroying it, then perhaps similar reconciliations are possible in other contexts. Perhaps divisions that seem permanent can be healed. Perhaps conflicts that appear irreconcilable can find resolution. Perhaps what was broken can be repaired if we have the wisdom and will to attempt it. The story remains unfinished, the question unanswered. Somewhere in the code of future Pokemon games, the possibility of the original dragon's return might already exist, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Or perhaps it will remain forever potential, never actual, a theoretical completion that serves its purpose better by staying just out of reach. Either way, the myth of Arceus's fourth creation and its mistake will continue to fascinate players who look closely at the patterns in Pokemon lore and wonder about the stories hidden between the lines. As the night grows later and your eyes grow heavy, these questions fade into the background, becoming part of the landscape of thought you carry into sleep. The dragons of Unova continue their eternal wait, frozen in division, hoping for a hero who may never come. Arceus watches from beyond time, contemplating the consequences of choices made when the world was young. And somewhere in the space between truth and ideals, in the realm where energy transforms and plasma flows, the ghost of the original dragon remembers what it was and dreams of what it might become again. The deeper we examine the evidence for the original dragon's existence, the more patterns emerge from the seemingly random details scattered across multiple games and regions. The connection between Sinnoh and Unova, between Arceus's first creations and the Tau trio, manifests in ways both obvious and subtle, creating a web of references that suggests deliberate design rather than coincidence. Each thread, when followed, leads back to the same conclusion, that something crucial was lost or deliberately removed from the cosmic order, and that its absence continues to affect reality. The plates that Arceus uses to change its type represent each element in the Pokemon world, allowing the god of creation to take on any form necessary for its purposes. There are 17 plates in total, each corresponding to a type, each representing a fundamental aspect of reality that Arceus must be able to embody. But the organization of these plates reveals interesting patterns about how Game Freak conceptualizes the relationship between different types and states of matter. The Flame Plate, Zap Plate, and Icicle Plate correspond to fire, electric, and ice respectively, the three elements that define the Tau Trio's offensive capabilities. These three types, when considered together, represent different expressions of energy, different ways that power can manifest in the physical world. Fire is thermal energy, heat that transforms matter through combustion. Electric is kinetic energy, the movement of charged particles through conducting mediums. Ice is the absence of thermal energy, the state where molecular motion slows to its minimum, where heat has been extracted and removed. That these three types exist as separate plates, separate aspects of Arceus's nature, suggests that the god of creation understands them as distinct but related concepts, different faces of the same underlying principle. The original dragon, as the guardian of energy and plasma, would have unified these three aspects, treating them not as separate types, but as different points on a single spectrum of energy states. Its division into three dragons would then represent the fragmentation of this unified understanding, the separation of what should be whole into pieces that can no longer fully comprehend each other. The creation of new types in recent generations also hints at the evolving understanding of what fundamental forces exist in the Pokémon world. Fairy type was introduced in Generation 6, representing a mystical or spiritual force that had always existed but was only recently recognized as distinct from normal or psychic types. The fact that new types can be discovered or defined suggests that the organization of reality is not fixed but contingent, subject to reinterpretation as understanding deepens. This raises the possibility that plasma or energy might become recognized as its own type in future generations, a new classification that would retroactively change how we understand the Tau trio and the original dragon. If a plasma type or energy type were introduced, Kyurem might gain this typing in a future form, finally representing the state of matter that was always its true nature. Such a change would be mechanically significant, creating new weaknesses and resistances, but it would also be mythologically meaningful, acknowledging officially what has been implied through lore all along. The relationship between legendary Pokémon and their regional contexts also bears examination. Each legendary tends to be deeply tied to the region where it appears, shaped by local mythology, geography, and cultural concerns. Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina are intrinsically linked to Sinnoh, to Mount Coronet and the Spear Pillar, to the temples and caves where humans have worshipped them for generations. They feel native to that region in ways that transcend mere geographic location, as if Sinnoh itself was designed as a stage for their eternal dance. The Tau trio feels similarly rooted in Unova, their legend woven into the foundation myths of the region, their forms reflecting the American aesthetics that inspire Unovan design. Reshiram's flowing white form evokes Art Deco elegance, the streamlined beauty of early 20th century American design. Zekrom's mechanical darkness suggests industrial power, the age of electricity, and engines that transformed the landscape. Kyurem's frozen incompleteness could represent post-industrial decay, the abandoned spaces left behind when industry moves on. But if the Tau trio are fragments of one of Arceus's original creations, then their connection to Unova must be secondary, a consequence of where they ended up rather than where they originated. The original dragon would have been created in the same era as the creation trio, potentially in the same location, before regions as we know them existed. It would have dwelt alongside Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina in some primordial realm, maintaining the balance of energy while its siblings governed time, space, and antimatter. The question then becomes how and when the original dragon migrated to what would eventually become Unova. Perhaps Arceus assigned each of its four creations to different regions, sending them out to maintain cosmic order from distributed locations. The original dragon would have traveled to the land that would become Unova, establishing itself there long before humans arrived, before the twin heroes were born, before the legend of division began. Alternatively, the division itself might have scattered the fragments across the world, with Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem appearing in Unova, not because the original dragon lived there, but because the cosmic trauma of fracture displaced them from their original location. In this interpretation, Unova would be the landing site rather than the home, the place where broken pieces came to rest after being ejected from their proper position in the cosmic hierarchy. The presence of the creation orbs in Dragon Spiral Tower suggests the former interpretation might be correct. If Sinnoh's most sacred artifacts appear in Unova, it implies a historical connection between the regions, a shared importance in the early cosmology of the Pokémon world. Perhaps Unova and Sinnoh were both sites of Arceus's creative work, locations where the god of Pokémon performed its most significant acts of creation. The original dragon would have been created in Unova, the fourth site alongside the three locations in Sinnoh where the creation trio emerged. This would make Dragon Spiral Tower equivalent to Spear Pillar, a place where the boundary between the normal world and cosmic reality is thin, where humans can encounter legendary Pokémon and sometimes influence their actions. The tower's claim to be a place where legendary Pokémon are created would then be literally true, marking it as one of Arceus's workshops, a location where divine power touched Earth and brought new beings into existence. The architectural similarities between Dragon Spiral Tower and other ancient structures in the Pokémon world support this connection. Many regions have towers or temples associated with legendary Pokémon, structures that seem impossibly old, built with techniques and materials that modern humans cannot replicate. Tin Tower and Bell Tower in Johto, Sky Pillar in Hoenn, Spear Pillar in Sinnoh all share aesthetic and functional elements that suggest common origin or purpose. These towers might have been built by the same ancient civilization, a global culture that existed before the current regions were established, when humanity was young and legendaries walked more openly among mortals. This civilization would have understood the cosmic order in ways that have since been lost, would have known about all four of Arceus's creations, and built temples to honor each. The current fragmented state of human knowledge, where different regions have different legends and different understandings of cosmic structure, would reflect the fall of this ancient civilization and the loss of unified wisdom it possessed. The unknown, mysterious Pokémon that exist in vast numbers in certain locations might be remnants of this ancient civilization's attempts to understand and communicate cosmic truths. Their alphabet-like forms suggest language and meaning, but their behavior seems random, purposeless, as if they are letters from a text whose context has been lost. In the Sinnoh ruins, accessible only through special events, unknown appear alongside Arceus, watching as the god of creation brings new legendary Pokémon into being. Their presence suggests they are somehow connected to the creative process, perhaps serving as the medium through which divine will becomes material reality. If unknown are letters in a cosmic language, then the original dragon's division might be comparable to a sentence being broken into individual words or letters, each still carrying meaning, but no longer forming a coherent message. The reformation of the original dragon would be like reassembling that sentence, restoring the ability to communicate or enact some profound truth that has been fragmented and rendered incomprehensible through division. The Godstone, in this metaphor, would be the grammar or syntax that allows the letters to combine back into meaningful language. The role of humans in maintaining or disrupting cosmic order appears repeatedly in Pokémon mythology. Most legendary Pokémon can interact with humans, can be caught and commanded by sufficiently skilled trainers, suggesting that mortal will has some degree of authority, even over divine beings. This relationship is not one of equality, but neither is it one of complete subordination. Humans cannot create legendary Pokémon or destroy them permanently, but they can influence where legendaries go, what actions they take, and sometimes even what forms they assume. The twin heroes of Unovan legend represent this human influence, at its most consequential. They commanded the original dragon, used its power to build a civilization, and their conflict directly caused its fracture. This level of influence over a cosmic entity seems disproportionate, suggesting that the original dragon was either specially designed to be responsive to human will, or that it chose to make itself vulnerable to mortal concerns for reasons of its own. If Arceus designed the original dragon to be humanity's guardian specifically, rather than a purely cosmic force like the creation trio, then its susceptibility to human conflicts would make sense. The dragon's purpose would have been to help humanity grow and develop, to provide energy and transformation as needed for civilization to flourish. Such a purpose would require close connection to human affairs, the ability to understand and respond to mortal needs and desires. But this connection would also create vulnerability, the possibility that human shortcomings could affect the dragon itself. The creation trio maintains distance from humanity precisely to avoid this vulnerability. Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina can be encountered and even caught by human trainers, but they do not serve human civilization in the active way that the original dragon apparently did. They maintain time, space, and antimatter, regardless of what humans do or want. Their purpose is cosmic rather than local. The original dragon's choice or design to serve humanity more directly would set it apart from its siblings, creating a fundamentally different relationship with mortal beings. This difference might have been part of Arceus's plan from the beginning. Perhaps the god of creation recognized that humans would need a guardian who understood their perspective, who could provide guidance and power appropriate to their developmental stage. The creation trio's cosmic functions are too vast and abstract for humans to benefit from directly, but energy and transformation are tangible needs that civilization requires. The original dragon would bridge the gap between cosmic and mortal scales, translating divine power into forms that humans could use and understand. The mistake would come from underestimating how deeply this connection might affect the guardian itself. Arceus might have assumed that a being powerful enough to represent the fourth state of matter would be able to maintain its essential nature regardless of human influence. The discovery that humans could cause such a being to fracture would have been unexpected, a failure of design that revealed limitations in Arceus's understanding of how consciousness and relationships function even at cosmic scales. The Lake Guardians, Arceus's second wave of creation, might have been designed to avoid this mistake. Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf grant knowledge, emotion, and willpower to humanity, profoundly influencing human development, but they do so while maintaining greater distance than the original dragon managed. They are gifts rather than servants, powers bestowed rather than beings bound to human command. This design allows them to affect humanity without becoming enmeshed in human conflicts in ways that might damage them. The relationship between the Lake Guardians and the Creation Dragons also deserves closer examination. In Sinnoh, the Lake Trio can be used to forge the Red Chain, a tool that allows humans to summon and potentially control members of the Creation Trio. This suggests that the second wave of creation has some degree of authority or connection to the first, that Arceus designed these tiers of legendary Pokémon to interact and balance each other. The presence of all three Lake Guardians in Univos during the events of Black 2 and White 2 might indicate that they were sent to evaluate or interact with the fragments of the fourth creation dragon. If the original dragon was designed to work in harmony with the Lake Guardians, granting humanity physical power while they granted mental and spiritual gifts, then its division would disrupt this arrangement. The Lake Guardian's journey to Unova might be an attempt to understand what went wrong and whether repair is possible. Uxie's placement near the location of the light or dark stone suggests it is studying the dormant dragon, analyzing the mechanisms of fusion and division to understand how a cosmic being could fracture so completely. Mesprit's presence at Celestial Tower implies it is mourning or commemorating what was lost, acknowledging the emotional weight of the original dragon's tragedy. Azelf's appearance near Giant Chasm suggests it is testing Kurum's will, evaluating whether the remnant dragon possesses enough determination to pursue reunion or has accepted its incomplete state as permanent. If the Lake Guardians report their findings back to Arceus, their assessment might influence whether the god of creation allows or facilitates the original dragon's reunion. A judgment that the dragons have learned from their division that they would not repeat the mistake of over-involvement with human conflicts might convince Arceus to permit their reformation. Alternatively, a finding that the fragments remain too unstable or too changed to safely reunify might lead to a divine decree that the current division must remain permanent. The question of whether legendary Pokémon possess genuine free will or merely follow programming established by Arceus becomes relevant here. If the creation dragons have no choice but to follow their natures, then any mistakes they make are ultimately Arceus's responsibility, flaws in design rather than failures of character. But if they possess true autonomy, the capacity to choose their actions, and even rebel against their intended purposes, then their division might represent a choice rather than an accident, a decision made by the original dragon itself rather than something imposed upon it. The legend suggests the latter interpretation. The dragon split itself in response to the hero's conflict, choosing division to satisfy both masters rather than being forced apart by external power. This implies consciousness and will, the ability to evaluate a situation and select a response even when that response has devastating consequences. A being capable of such choice might also be capable of choosing reunion, of deciding that wholeness is worth the price of abandoning the separate identities that Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem have developed. The mechanics of legendary Pokémon consciousness remain mysterious. Some Pokédex entries suggest legendary Pokémon do not reproduce, that each is unique and possibly eternal. Others hint at deaths and rebirths, cycles where legendary power passes between different individuals or manifestations. The treatment is inconsistent, leaving open multiple interpretations of what it means to be a legendary Pokémon and whether such beings experience existence in ways comparable to humans or common Pokémon. If legendary Pokémon are eternal and unchanging, then Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem would contain all the memories and experiences of the original dragon, would remember what unity felt like, and consciously experience their separation as loss. Their reunion would be a return to a known state, recovery of something they personally remember. This would make the division more tragic, as each fragment would spend every moment aware of what it once was and no longer is. If legendary Pokémon are more mutable, their consciousness shaped by their current form and circumstances, then the fragments might have only dim awareness of their unified past, if any at all. They would have developed as separate beings, acquiring distinct personalities and purposes over time. Reunion would then be not a return, but a transformation, the creation of a new consciousness from the merger of three established ones. The tragedy would lie not in constant awareness of loss, but in the necessity of sacrificing current identity to reclaim ancient wholeness. The stones that Reshiram and Zekrom become suggest the latter interpretation might be correct. If the dragons retained full consciousness while dormant in stone form, the experience would be akin to being locked in a coma, aware but unable to act, which seems excessively cruel even by the standards of a universe that contains Pokémon like Parasect or Drifloon. More likely, the stone transformation is a true dormancy, a state where consciousness ceases until the dragon is awakened, allowing time to pass without suffering through it. This would mean that Reshiram and Zekrom when awakened by their respective heroes in the black and white games, are beginning new periods of active existence, not merely resuming an existence that was interrupted. Their memories would persist from previous awakenings, but there would be gaps, periods where they existed as stone without thought or experience. Their identity would be cumulative, built from multiple active periods separated by dormant intervals, rather than continuous from the moment of their creation. Kyurem's inability to transform into a stone would then represent a curse rather than a choice. While its counterparts can escape the pain of incompletion through dormancy, Kyurem must remain conscious and aware, experiencing every moment of its fragmented existence without relief. The frozen wasteland it creates might be an attempt to induce a kind of stasis, to slow time and experience to the minimum possible level without achieving true dormancy. But consciousness persists, leaving Kyurem trapped in a twilight state between activity and rest. The DNA splicer's ability to force fusion between Kyurem and its counterparts raises ethical questions about consent and autonomy in legendary Pokémon interactions. When a trainer uses the splicers to create white Kyurem or black Kyurem, are all three dragons agreeing to this merger, or is it something imposed upon them through technological means? The games do not address this question directly, treating fusion as a mechanical process rather than a collaborative choice, but the implications are significant. If the splicers override the dragon's will, forcing them to merge regardless of their preferences, then human technology has achieved a troubling level of power over cosmic beings. The ability to compel legendary Pokémon to undergo fundamental transformations against their will represents a kind of violence, a violation of autonomy that might have profound consequences for the trainer-Pokémon relationship and for the cosmic order more broadly. If the fusion requires consent from all parties, then the successful use of the DNA splicers would indicate that Reshiram or Zekrom and Kyurem all choose to merge when given the opportunity, suggesting they desire reunion even in its incomplete form. This would provide evidence that the original dragon's consciousness persists across its fragments, that some drive toward unity remains, despite the time spent apart and the distinct identities that have developed. The experience of being white Kyurem or black Kyurem would differ significantly from being the original dragon. These fused forms combine two of the three fragments, but lack the third, creating beings that are more complete than any individual piece, but still fundamentally incomplete. The consciousness of such a fusion would presumably include aspects of both dragons, their thoughts and memories somehow merged or interleaved. Whether this creates a unified mind or a divided consciousness where two beings share one body remains unclear. The behavior of the fused forms does not reveal obvious internal conflict or dialogue between the component dragons, suggesting that fusion creates a single, unified consciousness rather than maintaining separate identities. But this might simply reflect the game's narrative constraints rather than the actual metaphysical reality. A Pokémon internally divided would be difficult to represent mechanically and could create confusing storytelling situations where players would need to know which component of the fused dragon is speaking or acting at any given moment. The fact that fusion can be easily reversed, that the DNA splicers can separate white Kyurem or black Kyurem back into their component dragons without apparent harm, suggests that the merger does not destroy the individual identities, but rather contains them. When separated, Kyurem and Reshiram or Zekrom presumably retain memories of their time fused, creating continuity of experience across both unified and divided states. This would allow the fragments to learn from their partial reunions, to practice unity in preparation for a potential complete merger. If multiple cycles of fusion and separation could eventually prepare the dragons for permanent reunion, then every trainer who uses the DNA splicers is contributing to this process, helping the fragments remember what unity feels like and become comfortable with the idea of permanent merger. In this interpretation, the current game mechanics represent a transitional phase, a period where the dragons experiment with reunion without fully committing to it, building toward an eventual future where they will choose permanent restoration. The original dragon's signature move, if it still possessed one, would presumably combine elements from all three fragments in ways that the fused forms cannot fully replicate. Fusion Flare and Fusion Bolt are hybrid moves that appear when Reshiram and Zekrom are on the field together, suggesting that the original dragon's presence enables attacks that neither fragment can perform alone. A true signature move for the unified dragon might combine fire, ice, and electricity in a single attack, creating a plasma strike that deals all three types of damage simultaneously. Such a move would be mechanically unique in the Pokémon series, the first attack to deal multiple types of damage at once. Its effectiveness would depend on the target's weaknesses and resistances to all three component types, potentially making it either devastatingly powerful or surprisingly weak depending on the matchup. Implementing such a move would require new game mechanics, systems that can calculate and display multi-type damage, which might explain why Game Freak has not yet introduced the complete original dragon despite the supporting lore. The visual design of this ultimate attack would need to convey the overwhelming power of unified plasma, the convergence of all energy states into a single, overwhelming force. Fan animations often depict the original dragon charging a sphere of swirling fire, ice, and electricity that expands to engulf the battlefield, creating a maelstrom of energy that obliterates everything in its path. The move would need significant downsides to balance its power, perhaps massive recoil damage, or requiring multiple turns to charge, ensuring it functions as a desperation technique rather than a spammable attack. The sound design would also matter greatly. The cries of legendary Pokémon are carefully crafted to convey their nature and power, and the original dragon's cry would need to incorporate elements from all three fragments while creating something new. Reshiram's bright, sustained tone, Zekrom's deep, mechanical rumble, and Kyurem's broken, harsh cry would blend into a sound that is simultaneously all three, and none of them, a voice that represents unity, transcending its components. The emotional impact of hearing this cry for the first time would be significant for players who have waited years for the complete dragon to appear. It would represent not just a new Pokémon, but a resolution to one of the longest running mysteries in the series, the fulfillment of hints and foreshadowing that have accumulated across multiple game generations. Getting such a moment right would require care and attention to detail, ensuring that the execution matches the build-up. The location where the original Dragon's reunion could occur matters significantly for the narrative weight of the event. Dragon Spiral Tower seems the most thematically appropriate, given its role as a place where legendary Pokémon are created, and its presence in both Black and White, and their sequels. The tower's height would allow for a dramatic visual moment, the three dragons ascending separately and descending as one, with the transformation visible across the entire region. Alternatively, a new location could be introduced, perhaps a hidden area that becomes accessible only when all three dragons are in the player's party, similar to how certain legendary encounters in other games require specific conditions. This location could be the original dragon's true resting place, a sanctuary that was sealed when the division occurred and can only be reopened when the possibility of reunion emerges. The architecture and atmosphere of such a place would need to convey both age and power, suggesting a connection to the earliest days of the Pokémon world. The role of human witnesses in the reunion also requires consideration. Should the player character be alone when the dragons merge, creating an intimate moment between trainer and legendary Pokémon? Or should other characters be present, witnesses to a cosmic event that affects more than just the individuals directly involved? The presence of characters like N, who represents an alternative approach to human Pokemon relationships, or Drayden, who preserves Onavan legendary lore, could add depth to the scene. N's reaction in particular would be meaningful, given his ability to hear Pokemon's voices and understand their feelings in ways normal humans cannot. If he were present for the original Dragons reunion, he could narrate what the dragons are experiencing, translating their emotions and thoughts for the player and adding layers of meaning to what might otherwise be a purely visual sequence. His presence would also create thematic resonance, connecting the original division caused by conflicting heroes to a modern reconciliation witnessed by someone who has transcended that binary thinking. The immediate aftermath of the reunion would also need careful handling. Does the original dragon remain with the player as a usable Pokemon, or does it ascend to some higher realm, resuming its cosmic duties and becoming unavailable for normal gameplay? The former option provides gameplay value, but might diminish the mythological significance of the event, reducing a cosmic guardian to a particularly powerful team member. The latter option maintains the dragon's special status, but might frustrate players who want to actually use the Pokemon they worked so hard to reunite. A compromise might allow the original dragon to be usable in specific contexts, but not in normal gameplay, similar to how some games restrict powerful legendaries from certain battle facilities or competitions. The dragon could be available for battling, but not tradable, ensuring that players cannot easily distribute such a significant Pokemon without earning it themselves. Or it might have a temporary manifestation, appearing for specific story battles or challenges, but returning to dormancy afterward, preventing casual use while still providing gameplay opportunities. The philosophical implications of reuniting the original dragon extend beyond the immediate narrative. If truth and ideals that can be synthesized in a single being, what does that mean for the conflicts that still divide the human world of Pokemon? The dragon's reunion would serve as a model or metaphor for human reconciliation, suggesting that opposing beliefs need not result in permanent division, that synthesis is possible even after long separation. This theme resonates with Pokemon's broader messages about cooperation and understanding. The series consistently emphasizes that diversity strengthens the world, that different types and species can work together despite their differences. The original Dragon's reunion would extend this message to the conceptual level, demonstrating that even fundamental philosophical conflicts can be resolved through understanding and willingness to transcend binary thinking. The impact on Arceus's perception of its creation would also merit exploration. Does the god of Pokemon view the reunion as correction of its mistake, restoration of its intended design, or does it see the current divided state as an improvement, a situation that turned out better than expected despite deviating from original plans? Arceus's response would reveal much about how divine beings in the Pokemon universe perceive error and adaptation, whether they insist on maintaining original designs or embrace evolution and change. If Arceus welcomes the reunion, it would suggest that the god of creation regrets the division and has been waiting for conditions that would allow safe restoration. The Lake Guardian's presence in Unova might then be revealed as part of a plan to evaluate and facilitate reunion when the time was right, acting on Arceus's instructions to prepare the way for the original dragon's return. If Arceus opposes or is ambivalent about the reunion, it would indicate that the god has accepted or even prefers the current arrangement, that it views the divided dragons as more useful or safer than the unified form would be. This darker interpretation would reveal Arceus as a pragmatic rather than benevolent creator, willing to sacrifice individual well-being for systemic stability, prioritizing cosmic order over the happiness of its creations. The player's agency in making this decision would create meaningful moral weight. Should you reunite the original dragon, Knowing it means destroying or at least fundamentally changing Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem as they currently exist. The game could present this as a genuine choice, with different endings depending on whether the player pursues reunion or accepts division, adding replay value while acknowledging the complexity of the decision. Such branching narratives are rare in main series Pokémon games, which typically offer linear stories with minimal player choice affecting outcomes. Introducing genuine moral decisions with significant consequences would represent a maturation of the series' storytelling, acknowledging that players are capable of engaging with complex ethical questions and might have different perspectives on what constitutes a good ending. The long term consequences of reuniting the original dragon would ripple through the Pokemon world in ways that subsequent games could explore. If the Energy Guardian resumed its cosmic duties, regions might experience changes in climate or natural energy flows, creating new gameplay opportunities or challenges. Areas that were previously inaccessible might open up. Locations that were once dangerous might become safe, reflecting the restored balance that the original Dragon's return brings. The reactions of other legendary Pokemon would also matter. Would Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina welcome the return of their fourth sibling, or would they view it with suspicion after such a long absence? The creation trio might need to re-establish working relationships with the Energy Guardian, relearning how to coordinate their cosmic functions after ages of operating as a trio instead of a quartet. This process might not be smooth, might create temporary instabilities that the player must help resolve. Minor legendaries and mythical Pokemon might also respond to the shift in cosmic order. Beings like Cresselia and Darkrai, who manage dreams, or Shaman and Celebi, who affect nature and time, might find their own duties easier or harder, depending on how the original dragon's return affects the fundamental structures of reality. The interconnection of all legendary Pokemon as components of a larger system would become more visible, showing how individual guardians are threads in a larger tapestry. The human population of Unova would certainly react to evidence that their foundational legend is not merely myth, but verifiable history. The twin heroes and the original dragon might have been considered stories for children, moral parables rather than actual events, but the appearance of a unified dragon would force re-evaluation of this assumption. How societies integrate confirmed cosmic events into their worldviews varies, and exploring different characters' reactions could add depth and realism to the narrative. Some might see the reunion as a religious or spiritual moment, proof that divine forces remain active in the world and responsive to human action. They might build new shrines or establish ceremonies commemorating the event, incorporating it into existing belief systems or creating new ones around it. Others might take a more scientific approach, seeking to study the dragon and understand the mechanisms of its division and reunion, hoping to extract principles that could be applied to other fields of knowledge. The economic and political implications cannot be ignored either. A being capable of controlling energy in its fundamental forms would represent both opportunity and threat to industrial civilization. Access to the original dragon could revolutionize energy production, transportation, and countless other fields, but it could also be weaponized, creating power imbalances between regions or factions. The question of who, if anyone, should have authority over such a being would become a central political issue. The player character's role as the one who reunited the dragons would place them in an unusual position of influence and responsibility. They would presumably have the strongest bond with the original dragon, perhaps the only human capable of communicating with it effectively or influencing its decisions. This creates something between a guardian and controlled relationship, neither fully one nor the other, that would need careful navigation to avoid both tyranny and abdication of necessary responsibility. The question of whether the original dragon should or would serve humans after its reunion remains open. It might remember the pain that came from its previous involvement with human affairs and choose to maintain distance, resuming cosmic duties without engaging with mortal concerns. Or it might view its experience with division as educational, something that made it wiser about how to interact with humans without becoming vulnerable to their conflicts. A mature relationship between the original dragon and humanity would acknowledge the mistakes of the past while not being paralyzed by them. The dragon would maintain appropriate boundaries, helping when truly needed, but not allowing itself to become a tool or weapon in human disputes. Humans would respect the dragon's autonomy and cosmic role, seeking its aid only for matters that genuinely require such powerful intervention, not for every minor problem or conflict. This kind of relationship requires wisdom on both sides, a mutual understanding that power creates responsibility and that cooperation works best when neither party tries to dominate the other. The original Dragon's division serves as a cautionary tale about what happens when these principles are violated, when beings become too entangled with concerns inappropriate to their nature and scope. As we drift toward the end of this long exploration into the nature of Arceus's fourth creation and the meaning of its division, certain themes emerge that transcend the specific details of Pokemon lore. The story touches on fundamental questions about unity and division, about whether what has been broken can truly be made whole again, about the costs of power and the responsibilities it creates. The original dragon, whether or not it is ever fully restored in actual games, serves an important function in the mythology of the Pokemon world. It represents potential, the possibility that mistakes can be corrected and divisions healed. It shows that even cosmic beings are subject to the consequences of their choices, that power does not grant immunity from suffering or error, and it demonstrates that some wounds, while deep, need not be permanent. The Tao Trio's separate existences have meaning and value, even as they point toward the possibility of reunion. Reshiram's dedication to truth provides clarity and honesty that the world needs. Zekram's pursuit of ideals offers vision and aspiration that drive progress and growth. Even Kyurem's incomplete state serves a purpose, reminding observers that not everything is whole, that absence and loss are real experiences that deserve acknowledgement rather than dismissal. The journey toward understanding the original dragon and its place in Pokemon mythology continues as new games are released and new details emerge. Each generation adds layers to established lore, sometimes clarifying what was ambiguous, sometimes creating new mysteries that deepen the overall narrative. The question of whether we will ever see the complete original dragon in an official game remains unanswered, but the speculation and discussion themselves have value, encouraging players to think deeply about the stories and themes woven through these games. The cosmological implications of a fourth creation dragon extend far beyond the immediate narrative of Unova and its legends. If the original dragon truly stood alongside Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina as a fundamental pillar of reality, then its division would have affected not just the local region, but the entire structure of the Pokemon universe. Energy flows through all things, connecting every region, every Pokemon, every human. A disruption in the Guardian responsible for managing that energy would ripple outward in ways both obvious and subtle. Consider the various energy-based phenomena that appear throughout the Pokemon world. The power spots in the Galar region, locations where Dynamax energy concentrates and allows Pokemon to temporarily grow to enormous size. The Z power in Alola, a mysterious force that enables Pokemon and trainers to synchronize and unleash devastating attacks. The Mega Evolution energy discovered in Kalos, allowing certain Pokemon to transform temporarily into more powerful forms. Each of these regional energy manifestations might represent attempts by the local environment to compensate for the absence of a properly functioning energy guardian. In a universe where the original dragon remained whole and fulfilled its intended role, these regional energies might not exist at all, or might manifest in entirely different ways. The dragon would regulate energy distribution across all regions, ensuring balance and preventing the kind of dangerous concentrations that Dynamax energy or runaway mega evolution can create. Its division would have removed this regulatory function, allowing energy to pool and crystallize in unexpected locations, creating both opportunities and hazards. The wishing stars that fall in Galar, fragments of a meteor that contain Dynamax energy, might be debris from the original Dragon's division, pieces of cosmic matter infused with plasma energy that scattered across the world when the dragon fractured. Their ability to enable Gigantamax forms in certain Pokémon could represent a diluted version of the transformative power the original dragon once wielded, now fragmented and distributed through physical objects rather than consciously directed by a guardian intelligence. The Zeta crystals of Alola tell a similar story. These crystallized forms of elemental energy allow brief moments of perfect synchronization between trainer and Pokémon, channeling power that exceeds normal limits. But the power is temporary and exhausting, burning bright for a moment before fading. If the original dragon were whole, perhaps such synchronization could be sustained longer or achieved more safely under the guidance of a being designed to manage energy flows and prevent burnout or backlash. Mega Evolution's connection to bonds between trainers and Pokémon and its requirement for specific Megastones suggests that emotional energy plays a role alongside physical energy in enabling transformation. The original dragon, as a guardian of all forms of energy, would presumably understand and facilitate these emotional connections, helping trainers and Pokémon achieve deep bonds without the risks that uncontrolled mega evolution can pose. Some Pokedex entries hint that mega evolution is painful for certain species, that the transformation strains their bodies and minds. A proper energy guardian might be able to ease this strain or prevent it entirely. The regional differences in how energy manifests might also reflect the original dragon's fragmented consciousness reaching out across the world, trying to fulfill its duties, despite existing in three separate and incomplete pieces. Reshiram's influence might be stronger in regions where fire and light predominate, where truth and clarity are valued. Zekrom's presence might be felt more keenly in industrialized areas where electricity powers civilization, where ideals drive development and progress. Kyurem's frozen emptiness might echo through places where energy has been depleted or withdrawn, creating voids that nothing quite fills. The distortion world, where Giratina dwells, exists as a mirror to the normal world, a place where physics operates differently and antimatter holds sway. Some theories suggest that every fundamental force has its own equivalent realm, a dimension where that force dominates and shapes reality according to different rules. If this is true, then there might be an energy world or plasma realm, a dimension that the original dragon once inhabited or ruled, a place where all energy exists in its pure form before condensing into the specific types and manifestations we observe in the normal world. This energy world would be incomprehensibly dangerous for ordinary Pokémon or humans to visit. Unshielded exposure to raw plasma energy would annihilate matter instantly, breaking molecular bonds and reducing anything solid to its component particles. The original dragon would have been immune to such effects, existing comfortably in an environment that would destroy lesser beings, serving as a buffer between the energy world and the normal world, allowing energy to flow between dimensions in controlled amounts. With the dragon divided, access to this energy world might have become disrupted or severed entirely. Energy still flows from wherever it originates, but without conscious management, the flow becomes chaotic, unpredictable. Some regions receive too much energy, creating hazards like power spots or areas where wild Pokemon are unusually aggressive due to energy saturation. Other regions receive too little, becoming depleted zones where Pokemon are weak and vegetation struggles to grow. The ultra wormholes discovered in Alola provide evidence that connections between dimensions remain possible even in the current fractured state of reality. These tiers in space-time allow passage between the Pokemon world and Ultra Space, bringing Ultra Beasts into environments where they don't belong. The existence of such wormholes suggests that dimensional boundaries are not absolute, that the structure of reality permits passage between realms under certain conditions. If ultra wormholes can connect to ultra space, then perhaps similar portals could reach the hypothetical energy world. The original dragon, when whole, might have created and maintained such portals deliberately, using them to regulate energy distribution. With the dragon divided, these portals would have closed or become unstable, no longer properly managed. Any attempts to reopen them would be dangerous without a guardian to control the energy flow, risking catastrophic releases that could devastate entire regions. The appearance of legendary Pokemon across different regions and time periods also suggests a hidden structure to reality that the games rarely make explicit. Dialga has been encountered in both Sinnoh and Johto, appearing in different eras and contexts. Giratina appears in Sinnoh and manifests in Unova during certain events. These movements suggest that the creation trio is not bound to specific locations, but rather patrols or monitors reality as needed, appearing wherever their particular domain requires attention. The original dragon, when whole, would have operated similarly, appearing in different regions and time periods to manage energy crises or maintain balance. Legends from multiple regions might reference a powerful dragon that appeared in ancient times, brought prosperity or destruction, and then vanished. These could all be accounts of the same being, the original dragon traveling through space and time before its division, fulfilling its cosmic responsibilities across the entire world rather than remaining fixed in one location. After the split, Reshiram and Zekrom became anchored to Unova, bound by their connection to the twin heroes and their descendants. This geographic limitation would prevent them from fulfilling the original dragon's global responsibilities, leaving other regions without proper energy management. Kyurem's frozen waiting in Giant Chasm represents complete abandonment of those duties, the remnant dragon unable or unwilling to act without its missing pieces. The environmental degradation visible in some Pokemon regions might partially result from this absence of proper energy stewardship. Areas like Ore, a barren wasteland where shadow Pokemon are created by sealing their hearts, represent extreme energy imbalance, places where the natural flow has been so disrupted that fundamental corruption becomes possible. A functioning energy guardian might have prevented such corruption, or could reverse it, restoring balance and healing the damage. The phenomenon of shadow Pokemon itself deserves examination in this context. The process of creating these corrupted creatures involves closing their hearts, cutting off their emotional connections, and turning them into pure fighting machines. This sounds like an energy manipulation, a forced redirection of the life force that normally flows through all Pokemon. The original dragon, as master of all energy, including life energy, would presumably find such manipulation abhorrent, a violation of natural order that it would work to prevent or undo. The purification of shadow Pokemon requires exposing them to positive emotional energy over time, gradually reopening their hearts and restoring their natural state. This healing process proves that the damage is reversible, that energy flows can be corrected even after severe disruption. The original dragon would be able to accelerate this process dramatically, or perhaps perform it instantly, channeling pure energy directly into the corrupted Pokémon and burning away the shadow corruption like sunlight dispelling darkness. Primal reversion, the phenomenon where Groudon and Kyogre temporarily return to their ancient forms through exposure to specific energy sources, provides another data point about how energy affects legendary Pokémon. The primal forms represent these creatures at their peak power, before some ancient event caused them to lose access to that power and enter dormant states. The energy required to trigger primal reversion is substantial, contained in the red and blue orbs, artifacts that concentrate and focus the specific types of energy these Pokemon embody. If similar artifacts existed for the Tau Trio, items that could restore them to theoretical primal or origin forms, what would such forms look like? Primal Reshiram might burn so hot that it begins to resemble a star, its body radiating light and heat visible from miles away, its flames transcending white into ultraviolet or beyond. Primal Zekrom might generate electrical fields so intense that lightning arcs constantly between its body and the environment, turning the air around it into a continuous storm of plasma and thunder. Primal Kyurem presents an interesting question. As an incomplete remnant, it's unclear whether it even has a primal form or whether its current state already represents diminishment from something greater. Perhaps primal Kyurem would be even more frozen, even more absent, approaching absolute zero and complete stillness. Or perhaps triggering primal reversion would force Kyurem to confront its incompleteness so directly that the transformation would fail or produce something unstable, a being caught between power and emptiness. The legendary Pokemon of Johto, the tower duo of Ho-Oh and Lugia, have their own complex relationship with energy and life force. Ho-Oh is said to revive the dead, creating the legendary beasts Raikou, Entei, and Suicune from Pokémon who perished in the burning of Brass Tower. This power over life and death implies mastery of some fundamental energy, the force that distinguishes living beings from inert matter. The original dragon might have possessed similar abilities, or perhaps Ho-Oh derives its resurrection power from energy principles that the original dragon once managed. Lugia, by contrast, controls weather and storms, its wings capable of generating winds powerful enough to destroy buildings and reshape coastlines. Weather is fundamentally an energy phenomenon driven by temperature differentials and the movement of air masses. A proper energy guardian would oversee weather patterns alongside other energy flows, ensuring that no region experiences extremes that would make it uninhabitable. Lugia's role in calming storms might represent an attempt to fulfill this function in the absence of the original dragon, taking on responsibilities that ideally would be managed at a higher cosmic level. The weather trio of Hoenn, Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza represent another layer of energy management, these three guardians regulating land, sea, and sky respectively. Their conflicts can trigger weather extremes that threaten all life, endless drought or limitless rain, requiring Rayquaza's intervention to restore balance. The original dragon would presumably stand above these conflicts, managing energy in ways that would prevent such extreme imbalances from developing in the first place. Rayquaza's ability to mega-evolve without requiring a megastone, instead drawing power directly from the ozone layer and the atmosphere itself, suggests a deep connection to ambient energy. It is the only legendary Pokemon capable of mega evolution without external tools, implying that it has learned or always possessed the ability to tap into energy sources that other Pokemon cannot access. This independence might be necessary precisely because no higher guardian exists to regulate energy for it, forcing Rayquaza to develop self-sufficiency that other legendaries don't require. The Swords of Justice, Cobalion, Terrakion, Varishan, and their companion Keldeo are legendary Pokémon found in Unova who protect Pokémon from human threats. Their presence in the same region where the original dragon divided is probably coincidental, but it raises interesting questions about whether they were affected by the energy disruption. These four are not cosmic guardians, but rather terrestrial protectors, operating on a much smaller scale than the creation dragons, yet they still serve important functions in maintaining natural order. Their fighting prowess and their dedication to justice might be enhanced by proper energy flow, allowing them to achieve feats of strength and endurance that would otherwise be impossible. With the original dragon divided, they might need to train harder, push themselves further to accomplish the same results. Or perhaps they draw on different energy sources entirely, tapping into the collective will of the Pokemon they protect rather than relying on cosmic energy flows. The mythical Pokemon scattered across various regions present yet another category of being, creatures that exist in legends but rarely appear, whose powers often seem disproportionate to their small size. Mew contains the genetic information of all Pokemon and can learn any move, suggesting a connection to some fundamental creative force. Celebi travels through time, carrying energy from one era to another. Jirachi grants wishes during brief periods of wakefulness, somehow converting desire into reality. These abilities all involve energy manipulation at profound levels. Creating any outcome from any wish requires converting intent into action, desire into matter, which is essentially what energy does, transforms potential into actual. The original dragon might serve as the source or conduit for the energy these mythical Pokemon use, providing them with the raw power they need to perform their impossible feats. Its division would limit but not eliminate their abilities, forcing them to draw on smaller reserves or work harder to achieve the same results. Victini, a mythical Pokemon native to Unova, produces unlimited energy and shares it with those it touches, granting certain victory to its allies. This power directly relates to energy generation and distribution, making Victini perhaps the closest analog to the original dragon on a smaller scale. Its presence in Unova specifically might not be coincidental, but rather a response to the void left by the dragon's division, a smaller being attempting to fill a role that once belonged to a cosmic guardian. Meloetta, another Unovan mythical, can change between aria and pirouette forms, shifting from a primarily special attacker to a physical one through the power of music. This transformation, while less dramatic than Mega Evolution or Primal Reversion, still demonstrates energy manipulation, the conversion of sound and emotion into physical power. Music has long been associated with mathematical harmony and energy frequencies, and Meloetta's powers suggest that these connections are literal rather than metaphorical in the Pokemon world. Genesect, a mythical Pokemon that was ancient even before being modified by Team Plasma, represents the intersection of natural and artificial energy. Its Technoblast attack changes type based on the drive it holds, demonstrating that even ancient Pokemon from eras before modern technology can be adapted to manipulate various forms of energy. The original dragon would have existed in that ancient era, and Genesect might have encountered it before both were changed, one through division and one through modification. The temporal aspects of the original dragon's potential existence raise questions about whether it can be encountered in past eras through time travel. Celebi can transport humans through time, and Dialga's mastery over time could theoretically allow access to any point in history. If the original dragon existed before its division, then traveling to that era would allow someone to meet it, to observe it fulfilling its duties, to see what was lost when it fractured. Such a journey would be dangerous on multiple levels, altering the past risks, creating paradoxes, changing the present in unpredictable ways. Meeting the original dragon might reveal information that affects how someone approaches the divided dragons in the present, potentially preventing the reunion by interfering with necessary events. or it might provide crucial understanding showing exactly what needs to happen to restore wholeness. The ethics of time travel in the Pokemon universe remain murky. Celebi apparently travels through time regularly without causing observable paradoxes, suggesting either that the timeline is robust enough to absorb changes or that Celebi is careful to avoid alterations. Dialga's relationship with time is more fundamental. As the creator and guardian of temporal flow, it might be able to prevent paradoxes through direct management, undoing changes that would create contradictions. If someone traveled back to witness the original Dragon's division, could they prevent it? Should they try? The division caused immense suffering for the dragon and disrupted cosmic energy management, suggesting intervention would be beneficial. But the division also created Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem as distinct beings who have lived their own lives and developed their own identities. Preventing the split would erase these beings from existence, replacing them with the unified dragon they once were part of. This creates a temporal ethics dilemma with no clear, correct answer. Saving the original dragon means destroying its fragments, but the fragments only exist because the original was destroyed. Any choice privileges one state of existence over another, one set of beings over another. Perhaps the only ethical solution is to accept what happened and focus on healing in the present rather than trying to undo the past. The role of human agency in all of this cannot be overstated. In the Pokemon universe, humans are not merely observers of cosmic events, but participants who can influence outcomes through their choices and actions. The twin heroes commanded the original dragon and caused its division through their conflict. Modern trainers can catch and command legendary Pokemon, can form bonds with them, can sometimes influence their decisions and actions. This suggests that the reunion of the original dragon, if it happens, will not be purely a cosmic event, but rather something that requires human involvement. A trainer would need to gather all three fragments, understand their natures, help them overcome the barriers to fusion, and possibly provide the emotional or philosophical framework that makes wholeness possible. This trainer would become part of the legend, their name remembered alongside the twin heroes as someone who shaped cosmic history through their actions. The qualities such a trainer would need are extraordinary. They would need the strength to catch and command all three dragons, proving their capability through battle. They would need wisdom to understand truth, ideals, and the synthesis between them, demonstrating philosophical maturity beyond what most trainers achieve. They would need compassion to recognize the suffering the division has caused and genuine desire to heal rather than simply acquire powerful Pokemon for personal gain. Most trainers, even strong ones, would fail one or more of these tests. Catching legendary Pokemon is relatively straightforward with enough patience and proper preparation, but understanding them, truly comprehending what they are and what they need, requires something rarer than battle skill. The original dragon's reunion might wait centuries or millennia for a trainer who possesses all the necessary qualities, someone who appears perhaps once in 1,000 generations. Or perhaps multiple trainers could collaborate, each providing something the others lack. One might provide battle strength, another philosophical understanding, a third emotional intelligence and compassion. Working together, they could accomplish what no individual could achieve alone. This would align with Pokemon's themes about cooperation and friendship, about achieving through unity what cannot be done through individual effort. The symbolism of such cooperation would mirror the dragon's own need to unify, creating a parallel between human and Pokemon reunion. Just as the dragons must overcome their division, so too must humans overcome their tendency toward conflict and competition, working together toward a common goal. The reunion becomes not just a cosmic event, but a lesson about the power of synthesis and collaboration. The aftermath of the original dragon's return would extend far beyond Unova. Every region would feel the effects as energy flows stabilized, as the cosmic order repaired itself, as one of Arceus's fundamental creations resumed its duties after however long the division lasted. Pokemon worldwide might become stronger, healthier, more balanced as proper energy distribution resumed. Regions that had been depleted might revitalize, while areas of dangerous energy concentration might calm as excess energy is drawn off and redistributed. The human population would react in varied ways. Some would celebrate the return of a legendary guardian, seeing it as a sign that the world is becoming more whole, more ordered. Others might fear it, worrying about what such a powerful being might do, whether it could be controlled or might act independently in ways that harm human interests. Governments and organizations would debate whether and how to interact with the reunified dragon, whether to seek its aid or leave it alone to fulfill its cosmic duties without interference. Scientists would have unprecedented opportunities to study energy phenomena under ideal conditions. With a functional energy guardian managing flows and maintaining balance, experiments that were previously too dangerous might become safe enough to attempt. New forms of energy utilization might become possible, technologies that work with cosmic energy principles rather than fighting against them. The reunification could trigger a renaissance in energy science and engineering across all regions. Religious and philosophical traditions would need to grapple with confirmation of their myths. Many cultures have stories about powerful dragons or divine beings that shaped the world in ancient times. The original dragon's return would prove that at least some of these stories are factually true, not merely symbolic or metaphorical. This might strengthen faith for some people, while challenging it for others who preferred to treat the myths as allegories rather than history. The relationship between Arceus and humanity would also come into sharper focus. The god of Pokémon created the original dragon and presumably could have prevented its division or forced its reunion at any point. The fact that Arceus has not done so suggests either that it cannot directly intervene in such matters, or that it chooses not to, preferring to allow events to unfold according to free will and natural consequences. Either interpretation has implications for how humans understand divine power and responsibility. If Arceus cannot intervene, then it is less omnipotent than some might assume, bound by rules or limitations even gods must respect. This makes Arceus more relatable in some ways, a being with vast power, but not infinite power, capable of mistakes and subject to constraints. Such a god would deserve respect, but not unquestioning worship, recognition of its importance, but also acknowledgement of its fallibility. If Arceus chooses not to intervene, then it is deliberately allowing the suffering and imbalance caused by the dragon's division to continue until the right conditions for reunion emerge. This suggests a hands-off approach to cosmic management, a preference for allowing things to develop naturally rather than imposing solutions from above. Such a god values free will and organic development over efficiency or immediate relief of suffering, which raises questions about divine priorities and values. The original dragon, once reunited, might offer insights into these questions through its own experiences and understanding of Arceus's nature. As one of the first creations, it might have been present for conversations or events that revealed Arceus's intentions and methods. It might understand why the division was allowed to persist, whether intervention was impossible or merely inadvisable. Sharing this knowledge with humans could transform how the Pokémon world understands divinity and cosmic order. However, the dragon might also choose to remain silent on such matters, judging that some knowledge is too dangerous or too easily misunderstood to share freely. The gap between cosmic and mortal scales of existence is vast, and what makes sense from a god's perspective might seem cruel or arbitrary from a human viewpoint. The dragon might decide that maintaining some mysteries is kinder than exposing humans to truths they cannot fully comprehend or accept. The practical applications of having a functional energy guardian would become apparent relatively quickly. Weather patterns might stabilize, reducing the severity of storms and droughts. Wild Pokemon might behave less aggressively, as energy that once made them irritable or dangerous is properly regulated. Technology that relies on Pokemon power or natural energy sources might operate more efficiently, with fewer fluctuations or failures. Trainers might notice that their Pokemon recover from exhaustion more quickly, that status conditions heal faster, that type effectiveness becomes more predictable as energy interactions stabilize. These changes would be subtle at first, easy to dismiss as coincidence or imagination, but over time, patterns would emerge, showing clear improvements across multiple metrics. Scientific studies would confirm what people felt intuitively, that something fundamental had changed for the better. The competitive battling scene would need to adapt to these new conditions. Strategies that relied on exploiting energy imbalances or leveraging unusual environmental effects might become less effective. New strategies would emerge that work with the improved energy flows rather than around previous limitations. The metagame would shift, potentially dramatically, as trainers discovered which Pokemon and tactics performed best under properly managed cosmic energy. Regional legendary Pokemon, who serve as lesser guardians, would likely breathe sighs of relief as their own duties became easier. Beings like Heatran, who manages volcanic energy, or Regigigas, who shaped continents, might find their work less strenuous, with a cosmic energy guardian helping maintain overall balance. They could focus on their specific domains without needing to compensate for broader systemic imbalances caused by the original dragon's absence. The Regi trio, Regirock, Regis, and Registeel, were created by Regigigas to help it shape the world. These three golems represent solid, frozen, and metallic forms of matter respectively, showing interesting parallels to the creation trio's secondary typings. If Regigigas understood or had access to knowledge about the original dragon, it might have designed the Regi trio to mirror the states of matter that the four cosmic guardians represent, creating a lower tier reflection of higher cosmic structures. This pattern of reflection of higher cosmic structures being echoed at regional and local scales appears repeatedly throughout Pokemon mythology. It suggests that the universe is organized in hierarchical layers, with cosmic guardians at the top, regional legendaries in the middle, and common Pokemon at the bottom, but with all layers connected through common principles and energy flows. The original Dragon's reunion would strengthen all these connections, allowing energy and influence to flow more smoothly between levels. The concept of legendary Pokemon having regional variants or forms adds another layer of complexity. Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres appear in both Kanto and Galar, but the Galarian forms are different types and have distinct appearances, suggesting either that these legendaries can adapt to regional conditions, or that multiple individuals exist, or that what we call legendary Pokemon are actually roles that different beings can fill rather than unique individuals. If the legendary birds are roles rather than individuals, then perhaps the creation dragons are as well. The original dragon would be a role, a cosmic position that needs to be filled. Sa and Dialga, Palkia, Giratina, and the Unified Energy Guardian are the current holders of those positions. The division might have split the Energy Guardian role into three pieces, with Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem each holding fragments of authority that should be unified in a single being. This interpretation would mean that reunifying the dragons is not just healing a broken individual, but restoring a cosmic function, filling a role that has been vacant or improperly staffed for too long. The universe needs a proper energy guardian, regardless of which specific being serves in that role. If Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem cannot or will not reunify, perhaps eventually a different being would emerge to fill the position, though creating a new cosmic guardian might be beyond anyone's power except Arceus itself. The possibility of creating new legendary Pokémon through artificial means has been explored in various games. Mewtwo was created by human scientists manipulating Mew's genetic material, producing a being of comparable power to natural legendaries. Type: Null and Silvally were created as artificial synthetics meant to fight Ultra Beasts, designed by human engineering rather than natural or divine creation. These examples prove that legendary tier beings can be manufactured, not just born or formed through cosmic processes. Could humans create an artificial energy guardian if the original dragon cannot be restored? The technical challenges would be immense, requiring understanding of energy dynamics that humans have barely begun to grasp. But the potential benefits might justify the effort, especially if energy imbalances continue to worsen over time. An artificial guardian might not perfectly replicate what the original dragon was, but it could serve the essential function of managing energy flows and maintaining cosmic balance. The ethical implications of such a project are staggering. Creating a being specifically to serve as a cosmic guardian is essentially creating a slave, bringing something into existence for the sole purpose of performing duties it never chose. The artificial guardian might resent this imposed purpose, might rebel or refuse to serve, creating new problems rather than solving existing ones. The history of artificial legendaries like Mewtwo and Genesect shows that created beings often struggle with questions of purpose and identity, sometimes violently. Natural legendary Pokémon seem to accept their roles without apparent distress, but this might be because they were created specifically for those roles, with natures and inclinations that make their duties feel natural rather than imposed. An artificial guardian created by humans might lack this alignment between nature and duty, might experience its cosmic responsibilities as burden rather than purpose. Ensuring that a created guardian would be psychologically healthy and willing to serve would require ethical considerations that human science might not be equipped to address. The relationship between form and function in legendary Pokémon also deserves deeper consideration. Each legendary's appearance reflects its domain and abilities. Dialga's steel body and clock-like details mark it as the master of time. Palkia's pearls and streamlined form suggest space and dimensional travel. The original dragon's appearance, if we could see it, would presumably combine fire, ice, and electrical elements in ways that clearly communicate its role as energy guardian. Fan designs for the original dragon typically show it as symmetrical, combining Reshiram's white and Zekrom's black in balanced patterns, with Kyurem's ice serving as a unifying element. Some depictions give it 3 heads, one for each fragment, while others show a single head with features drawn from all 3. The body might combine organic and mechanical elements, feathered wings, and metallic scales, radiant energy, and frozen stillness, creating a visual paradox that somehow works as a unified whole. The size of the original dragon is another point of speculation. Reshiram and Zekrom are both large Pokémon over 9 feet tall, while Kyurem is slightly taller at nearly 10 feet. The original dragon would presumably be larger than any individual fragment, perhaps approaching the size of Giratina in its origin form, which measures over 14 feet. A being designed to manage energy on a cosmic scale would need physical presence to match its spiritual and conceptual importance. However, size might be less fixed for legendary Pokémon than for common species. Some legends describe Groudon and Kyogre as large enough to reshape continents, while game representations show them as merely very large rather than kaiju sized. The discrepancy might reflect the Pokemon's ability to change size, appearing smaller for convenience when interacting with humans, but assuming true cosmic scale when performing their actual duties. The original dragon might be 9 feet tall when manifesting to humans, but miles long when operating at full cosmic power. The voice of the original dragon would need to combine elements from all three fragments while creating something new and distinct. Reshiram's cry is bright and sustained, almost musical. Zekrom's is deep and mechanical, resonant with power. Kyurem's is harsh and broken, painful to hear. The combination might create something haunting and beautiful, all three tones woven together into a harmony that none can achieve separately, a sound that represents unity, transcending division. Hearing this cry for the first time would be an emotional moment for anyone who knows the story of the dragon's division. It would represent not just a new Pokemon, but the healing of an ancient wound, the correction of a cosmic mistake. The cry might echo across the entire world, audible in every region simultaneously, announcing that balance has been restored and the Energy Guardian has returned to its rightful position. The move animations for the original dragon would need to reflect its unified nature. When using fire attacks, perhaps ice and electricity would still be visible, woven into the flames as complementary forces rather than opposing ones. Electric attacks might show frost and fire dancing around the lightning. Ice attacks could glow with inner heat and spark with electrical charge. Every attack would demonstrate that all forms of energy are ultimately one, different expressions of the same fundamental force. The original dragon's ability might be something that affects all energy-based moves on the field, perhaps increasing the power of fire, electric, and ice attacks for all Pokémon, friend and foe alike. This would reflect its role as a guardian rather than a warrior, serving to enhance and balance energy rather than hoarding it for personal use. Or the ability might allow it to change type based on the last move used, fluidly shifting between Dragon Fire, Dragon Electric, and Dragon Ice depending on how it acts, embodying the transformative nature of plasma. The signature move, as discussed earlier, would deal fire, electric, and ice damage simultaneously, but its exact mechanics would need careful balancing. Perhaps it could be super effective against Pokemon weak to any of the three types, but not very effective against Pokemon resistant to all three, creating a move that excels at hitting neutrally but struggles against specific defensive builds. The animation would show the target being struck by white fire, black lightning, and frozen wind all at once, overwhelmed by energy from every direction. The strategic implications of such a move are fascinating. It would function as excellent neutral coverage, hitting most Pokemon at least neutrally, and many for super effective damage. But against specifically built defensive teams with resistances to fire, electric, and ice, it would deal reduced damage, making the original dragon vulnerable to well-prepared opponents despite its legendary status. This would maintain competitive balance while still giving the dragon a unique and powerful tool. The original dragon's stat distribution would need to reflect perfect balance while maintaining overwhelming power. Equal attack and special attack would allow it to threaten from both sides of the damage equation. Balanced defenses would prevent exploitation of specific weaknesses. High speed would allow it to act before most opponents, befitting a being of pure energy. And substantial HP would provide the bulk necessary to survive long enough to demonstrate its full capabilities. A base stat total of 720 seems appropriate, 40 points higher than the fragments, but still below Arceus's 780. This would mark the original dragon as superior to standard legendaries, but inferior to the god of creation, maintaining the cosmic hierarchy while still representing a significant power increase over the divided forms. The stat distribution might be 120 HP, 130 attack, 110 defense, 130 special attack, 110 special defense, and 120 speed, creating a fast, powerful attacker with decent bulk. The types of moves the original dragon could learn would expand beyond what any individual fragment can access. It would retain all the moves that Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem learn naturally, plus gain access to moves that require the synergy of all three elements. Perhaps it could learn unique move combinations that no other Pokemon can use, attacks that only make sense when a being commands all forms of energy simultaneously. Weather moves might function differently in its hands, creating hybrid weather conditions that mix rain, sun, and hail into something entirely new. The presence of the original dragon in battle would fundamentally change how that battle operates. Its ability might create an energy field that affects all Pokemon, altering the effectiveness of moves or changing how energy flows during combat. Pokemon might find themselves able to use moves they normally cannot, or discover that familiar moves function differently, as proper energy management allows new possibilities to emerge. The battle itself becomes a teaching moment, demonstrating what proper cosmic order looks like. Outside of battle, the original dragon's influence on the environment would be profound and visible. Areas it visits might experience temporary normalization of energy flows, wild Pokemon behaving more calmly, plants growing more vigorously, technology functioning more reliably. These effects would fade once it departs, like ripples spreading from a stone thrown in water, but while present, they would show how reality is meant to function when properly maintained. The dragon might also have abilities that allow it to see or sense energy flows directly, perceiving the world in ways humans and most Pokemon cannot. It would see the connections between all things, the currents of power flowing through the earth and air, the concentrations and depletions that indicate problems requiring attention. This perception would guide its actions, allowing it to identify and address energy imbalances before they become critical. Communication with the original dragon might be possible through telepathy or through interpreters who can understand its intentions. Unlike some legendaries that appear content to remain mysterious, the Energy Guardian might actively seek dialogue with humans and other Pokemon, wanting to explain its role and teach others how to maintain energy balance in their own spheres of influence. It might appear to trainers not just as a powerful Pokemon to catch, but as a teacher with wisdom to share. The lessons it could teach would transform energy research and applications across all regions. Understanding how energy truly flows, how it can be safely manipulated, how balance is maintained, would revolutionize everything from Pokemon training to technology to medicine. The dragon would not provide solutions directly, but rather teach principles, allowing humans to develop their own applications appropriate to their needs and understanding. However, some knowledge might be withheld as too dangerous for humans to possess at their current developmental stage. Just as Arceus does not grant humans the power to create universes or manipulate time freely, the original dragon might limit what it teaches, ensuring that humans cannot accidentally or intentionally cause catastrophic energy disruptions. The line between helpful teaching and dangerous enabling would require careful judgment, and the dragon might err on the side of caution, preferring to withhold knowledge rather than risk misuse. The question of whether the original dragon would reproduce or create offspring adds another layer of complexity. Most legendary Pokemon do not reproduce, existing as unique individuals. But some legendary lines do have multiple members. Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres appear in multiple regions, suggesting either multiple individuals or some form of reproduction. If the original dragon could create descendants, beings with some fraction of its power and purpose, it might do so as a way to distribute energy management responsibilities without requiring its constant attention. These descendants would be lesser energy guardians, capable of managing regional or local energy flows, while their progenitor handles cosmic scale maintenance. They might appear similar to the original dragon, but smaller, less powerful, specialized for specific types of energy rather than commanding all forms equally. Over time, a whole lineage might develop, spreading across regions and gradually taking over more of the energy management duties, allowing the original dragon to focus on the most critical problems. The relationship between the original dragon and Arceus would need resolution before the dragon could fully resume its duties. If tension or estrangement exists between creator and creation, it would need to be addressed through dialogue and reconciliation. Arceus might need to acknowledge any mistakes it made in the dragon's creation or in allowing the division to persist. The dragon might need to accept responsibility for becoming too involved with mortal affairs, for allowing itself to be vulnerable to the conflicts that caused its fracture. Such reconciliation might occur privately, in realms beyond human observation, or it might unfold as a public event that trainers can witness and participate in. The latter option would provide narrative closure and emotional satisfaction, showing that even cosmic beings can work through their differences and find common ground. It would model healthy conflict resolution on a scale so grand that the lessons apply to everything from international diplomacy to personal relationships. The original dragon's return might also trigger appearances by other cosmic beings who have remained hidden or dormant. Entities at the same power level as the creation dragons might sense the restoration of balance and choose to reveal themselves, emerging from whatever places they have dwelt to greet the reunified guardian. These beings might have their own domains and responsibilities, forces or aspects of reality that humans have not yet recognized as requiring conscious management. Imagine a guardian of gravity, ensuring that celestial bodies remain in proper orbits and that fundamental forces maintain consistent strength, or a guardian of consciousness, managing the boundaries between living and unliving, sapient and non sapient, ensuring that minds can exist without collapsing into chaos or rigidity, or a guardian of boundaries, maintaining the distinctions between categories and types, ensuring that reality remains coherent rather than dissolving into undifferentiated unity. These hypothetical guardians would operate at the same cosmic level as the creation dragons, each managing one fundamental aspect of existence. Together they would form a complete pantheon, a set of cosmic functions that collectively maintain reality. The original dragon's absence would have disrupted this system, forcing other guardians to compensate for missing energy management, stretching themselves thin and creating vulnerabilities elsewhere in the cosmic order. The restoration of the energy guardian would allow these other beings to return to their proper duties, no longer overburdened by trying to cover for the absent fourth creation. The entire system would strengthen and stabilize, becoming more resilient against threats and more effective at maintaining the conditions necessary for life and consciousness to flourish. This system-wide improvement would be the true benefit of the original dragon's return, not just local effects in individual regions, but cosmic scale restoration of proper function. The threat that originally motivated Arceus to create cosmic guardians might also be relevant to consider. Why does reality need active management? What dangers exist that require conscious guardians to maintain cosmic order? The answers might involve forces that threaten to destabilize or destroy reality if left unchecked, threats from outside the universe, or problems inherent to existence itself that require constant vigilance to prevent. Ultra beasts hint at one kind of threat, beings from other dimensions whose presence in the Pokemon world creates instabilities and dangers. If travel between dimensions is possible, then beings or forces inimical to this reality might constantly attempt to invade or corrupt it. Cosmic guardians would serve as a defensive system, detecting and repelling such intrusions before they can cause significant damage. The original dragon's absence would have weakened these defenses, making the world more vulnerable to dimensional threats. Another possibility is that reality itself is inherently unstable, constantly trying to collapse back into void or chaos. The cosmic guardians would then function as a maintenance system, actively sustaining the patterns and structures that allow ordered existence to persist. Time tends toward entropy. Space can tear or crumple, antimatter threatens to annihilate matter, and energy seeks equilibrium. The Guardians work against these tendencies, maintaining useful levels of disequilibrium that permit complexity and life. The philosophical implications of this are profound. If reality requires constant maintenance, then existence is not a default state, but an achievement, something that must be actively sustained through effort and attention. This means that life, consciousness, and all we value exist only because cosmic guardians choose to maintain the conditions that allow them. We owe our existence not just to Arceus's initial creation, but to ongoing work by the guardians who prevent reality from collapsing back into nothing. Understanding this might change how humans relate to legendary Pokémon, moving from seeing them as powerful beings to be caught and commanded, toward recognizing them as essential workers whose duties make everything else possible. A trainer who catches the original dragon would not just acquire a powerful team member, but would become responsible for ensuring the dragon can continue its cosmic work, perhaps even assisting in that work when possible. This shift in perspective would represent maturation in human Pokemon relationships, moving beyond exploitation or even partnership towards something more like stewardship or cooperation in maintaining the world. Humans would recognize that their interests and the Guardian's interests are aligned, that both benefit from a stable, well maintained reality, and that working together serves everyone better than working at cross purposes. The cultural stories that develop around the original dragon's return would be told for generations, becoming new myths that supplement or replace older ones. Children would grow up hearing about the reunification, learning lessons about the importance of unity, the possibility of healing old wounds, the value of synthesis over division. These stories would shape how future generations think about conflict resolution, energy management, and humanity's place in the cosmos. Different regions would tell the story differently, emphasizing aspects that resonate with local values and concerns. Unova would focus on the twin heroes and the tragic division, treating the reunification as redemption for ancient mistakes. Sinnoh might emphasize Arceus's role in the restoration of cosmic order. Galar might focus on the energy applications and technological benefits. Each telling would be true in its way, capturing different facets of a complex event. Artists would create works inspired by the reunification, paintings and sculptures, and musical compositions that attempt to capture the emotional and spiritual significance of what occurred. These works would vary wildly in quality and interpretation, from profound masterpieces that genuinely capture something essential to shallow commercial products that exploit the event's popularity. But even the shallow works would serve a purpose, keeping the memory alive and ensuring that the reunification remains part of cultural consciousness. Scientific papers would analyze the event from every possible angle, measuring energy changes, cataloging environmental effects, studying the dragon's biology and abilities. These investigations would generate massive amounts of data and drive theoretical developments across multiple fields. Some findings would revolutionize understanding, while others would be incremental, but collectively they would represent a leap forward in human knowledge comparable to discovering fire or inventing writing. The economic impacts would ripple through all markets. Energy companies would need to adapt to new conditions or risk obsolescence. Technology firms would race to develop applications based on improved understanding of energy principles. Agricultural producers would find their yields improving as plants thrive in better balanced energy conditions. Real estate values would shift as areas that were marginal become desirable once energy imbalances are corrected. Political powers would vie for influence over or access to the original dragon, each wanting to secure advantages for their nation or faction. International tensions might rise as countries worry about others gaining disproportionate benefits from the dragon's presence. Diplomats would work overtime to prevent conflicts and ensure that the dragon's return brings global benefits rather than new sources of division and competition. Some groups might oppose the reunification, seeing it as a threat to established interests or ideologies. Energy companies that profit from scarcity might fear that improved energy management will reduce demand for their products. Religious groups with cosmologies incompatible with the dragon's existence might reject evidence of its return as deception or trickery. These opposition movements would need to be addressed through education, dialogue, and demonstration of benefits, showing skeptics that the reunification serves everyone's interests. The original dragon itself would need to navigate these political and social complexities, deciding how much to engage with human societies and how much to maintain distance while performing its duties. It might choose representatives or intermediaries, beings who can speak on its behalf and help manage human expectations and requests. Or it might remain aloof, appearing only when cosmic functions require physical manifestation, otherwise working invisibly to maintain energy balance. The legacy of the division would remain even after reunification, a scar in cosmic history that reminds everyone of what was lost and what was learned. Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem as separate beings would cease to exist, but their memories and experiences would persist within the unified dragon, informing how it approaches its renewed duties. The time spent divided might actually have taught the dragon valuable lessons about vulnerability, suffering, and the importance of maintaining proper boundaries with mortal beings. In this sense, the division might ultimately prove beneficial despite the pain it caused, a necessary learning experience that made the original dragon wiser and more careful than it was before. The mistake would be redeemed through growth, the wound transformed into wisdom. This would align with broader themes in Pokémon about how even negative experiences can contribute to development, how struggles make us stronger if they don't destroy us. The question of what happens to individual consciousness during fusion remains philosophically troubling. If Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem have developed separate identities and self-awareness over the time they have been divided, forcing them to merge might constitute a kind of death, the ending of three individual perspectives and their replacement with a single unified consciousness. Even if that unified consciousness contains memories from all three fragments, those fragments would no longer exist as distinct centers of experience. This is similar to philosophical questions about personal identity through radical change. If a person undergoes such extreme transformation that their personality, memories, and values completely change, is the resulting being still the same person? At what point does change become so extensive that we are dealing with a different individual rather than the original in altered form? The dragon's reunification forces these questions into sharp focus. Perhaps the resolution lies in recognizing that identity is more fluid than we typically assume, that beings are processes rather than static entities, constantly changing while maintaining continuity through memory and causal connection. The original dragon was always becoming its fragments, and the fragments are now becoming the original dragon again, points on a timeline of continuous transformation rather than distinct beings replaced by one another. This philosophical perspective would provide comfort to those troubled by the apparent death of Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem as individuals. Those three are not being destroyed, but rather completing a transformation begun long ago when they first separated. They are not dying but returning home, not ending but beginning again. The unified dragon contains everything they were and are, plus the wholeness they could not achieve separately. As sleep approaches and consciousness begins to fade, these questions of identity and transformation take on dreamlike quality, blending into each other as boundaries dissolve. The distinction between 1 and 3, between division and unity, becomes less clear and perhaps less important. What matters is continuation, the flow of being through different forms, the persistence of essence across radical changes in manifestation. The original dragon's story, whether it ends in reunification or continues in division, speaks to something deep in human experience. We all feel incomplete in various ways, sensing that parts of ourselves have been separated or lost, hoping that someday we might become whole again. We all know conflicts that seem irreconcilable, truths and ideals that cannot apparently coexist, yearnings for synthesis that remains forever out of reach. In watching the dragons struggle toward reunion, we see reflections of our own struggles, cosmic scale amplifying human concerns until they become mythological. And in hoping for their reunification, we express hope for our own healing, our own resolution of divisions internal and external. The story becomes personal even as it remains universal, speaking to each individual while addressing all of humanity. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed drifting through these quiet moments, there's another video waiting on the left of your screen. Let it play while you rest. You might discover something gentle before sleep takes you again. The mistake that Arceus made, if indeed it was a mistake rather than a deliberate choice, was creating something powerful enough to shape reality, but vulnerable enough to be shaped by mortal concerns. The original dragon stood at the intersection of cosmic and earthly scales, too large for humans to fully comprehend, but too connected to avoid being affected by human emotions and conflicts. This liminal position made it uniquely useful, but also uniquely fragile, able to serve purposes that purely cosmic entities could not while remaining subject to damages that such entities would never experience. Whether the original dragon will ever be restored, whether the mistake will ever be truly corrected, depends on factors both within and beyond the games themselves. Game Freak must decide whether the story they want to tell includes this resolution, whether the themes and messages they wish to convey align with reunification, or whether the divided state serves their purposes better. Players must continue to show interest in the lore, must demonstrate that these mythological questions matter to them and affect their engagement with the series. The evidence points toward eventual revelation and possibly reunion, but the timing remains uncertain. Each new generation brings new legendary Pokémon and new stories, and there is only so much space in each game for exploring established legendaries, alongside introducing new ones. The original dragon's complete form might wait years or even decades for its proper moment, might be saved for a special anniversary game or a Legends title focused specifically on Unovan mythology. But the waiting itself is part of the story, part of what makes the original Dragon's Tale so compelling. Like Kyurem frozen in Giant Chasm, we wait for completion, for answers, for the moment when all the pieces finally come together. The waiting teaches patience, encourages continued engagement, and makes the eventual resolution, whenever it comes, feel earned rather than arbitrary. In the darkness of night, as sleep approaches and thoughts drift toward rest, these stories of legendary Pokémon and cosmic mistakes serve as modern myths, tales that carry meaning beyond their entertainment value. They speak to experiences we all share, feelings of incompleteness, wishes that broken things could be made whole, understanding that power and responsibility cannot be separated. The original dragon's legend resonates because it reflects our own struggles with division and unity, our own hopes for reconciliation after conflict. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed drifting through these quiet moments, there's another video waiting on the left of your screen. Let it play while you rest. You might discover something gentle before sleep takes you again.